a ton. And keep in mind, guys, we are completely viewer powered. So if you'd like to donate and support to the channel, you can do so by going to PayPal, Cash App, Facebook Messenger Pay, or joining us over on Patreon. All the links will be in the chat box as well as in the description and pinned at the top of the comment section on the platform that you're watching this on. And, big ups and big thanks to all of you guys that, are generous enough to donate and give your gifts and take the time out to watch and share is greatly appreciated. So tonight we've got a really cool one. This is part two, actually, to one of the more interesting videos I feel like I've done in quite a while. And I do want to ask those that are in the chat if you guys can let me know if I'm coming through clear, if we have clear audio, the video's coming through clear, all that good stuff. Please give me a heads up and let me know that you guys can see me and hear me. But tonight we're going to be talking about the fate of Atlantis, dark matter, entropy, and the end of the simulation. And this is part two. This is part two of the series. Now, in part one, we got into just some very wild theories and speculations about really, it bust out to the simulation, right? Living into a simulation, a holographic universe that is a simulated experience that we call life, you know? Each and every one of us playing out this experience. Now, we didn't really go into the depths of who created the simulation, who is controlling the simulation, what's outside of the simulation. As we move towards the end of tonight's show or later in the show, we're going to look at the possibility of extraterrestrials and things of that nature, just to kind of explore it, and dabble in that and really see where it all fits within this. But what we did look at was parts of information theory, right? And entropy, and how these resets that continue to happen here on Earth every so often, periodically, cyclically, right? We're experiencing these massive resets. And, we've got quite a few different schools of thought when it comes to these resets. A lot of people blame this on, secret societies and the elite. And I'm not saying that there isn't an element of that that's taking place, but perhaps they aren't the ones that are in control of these resets. They are just trying to essentially wipe the memory or wipe the slate clean from humanity and the collective conscious. That way, we don't understand that we are living in a simulation, that we are periodically reset, and that, there really is no point to the game that we're playing other than providing information and experience to this whoever created it, right? And who knows whether they're benevolent or otherwise, and the reasons that it's been created. If we look at some of the oldest epics and mythos that we have here on planet Earth, like the Sumerian tales, right, and the Anunnaki, we were created as a slave race, and I have spoken about this before. How we were created to mine gold, and in the esoteric sense or spiritual sense, biblically especially, whenever they talk about gold and gold is mentioned, gold is always describing one of two things, really. It's either one, the heavens, like the heavens up above the sky. Gold is often referred to as the heavens, or it is referred to as your soul, right? Our spirit, our spiritual essence, our pure essence, right? So when you think of like a slave race that has been created to mine gold by these intradimensional spiritual entities, and you think about, a lot of the other um, mythologies and creation epics and religions that have been created across the world, and they're all pretty much damn near the same, or in that a similar vein, um, as we are being used or harvested for some form of energy, and that energy is spiritual, and there is a spiritual war that is taking place. Then you start to look at the side of this of where this is some construct, some sort of simulation. And we talk about in the book of Genesis how it says we were made in the image of the Elohim. And this is one of the things I love to point to the most on this channel. And I pointed to it probably a billion times. Um, that when we look at that, first off, Elohim is plural, right? Which means supreme magistrates, or holy ones, messengers. It's talking about heavenly hosts, stars, planets, or angels, aliens, extraterrestrials. I mean, you could give it a million different names, whatever it is. It's these uh, ethereal, angelic beings, and there's more than one that went into the creation of humankind. And then you break down what the etymology of the word image is, and it plays to um, a phantom, a projection, or an illusion. And this is where we get that holographic image. It even, the word idol, and you look at like the Bible and it talks about not worshiping false idols and shit. Like, you're the false idol, right? Meaning your consciousness is some other place, and we even have very, very prominent people to this day that talk about the probability of us living in a simulation. One of the more famous ones is Elon Musk, right? He was asked, like, if he could, what question would he ask about us living in a simulation? And he said that he would ask, what's outside of the simulation? I think that really is the question all of us want to know, and to what end. And then we hear these tales of Atlantis, this extremely advanced civilization, this extremely advanced civilization. Audio and video is good. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that. Well, we'll get it. We'll try to check out some of that. I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about. I have to catch up on that. It says, look at this helicopter crash, the constructor viral simulation breaking down. I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah, and that's a thing. We see, like, plane crashes happening all at once. It's almost as like the simulation's becoming incredibly fucking obvious at this point, to me, when you see these kind of like anomalous things happening. It's almost like it's being put in your face. And at least that's my opinion. Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that. So um but when we look at the simulation, we look at, like, the civilization of Atlantis, right? And some people call this the lost continent. And we're going to look at different viewpoints on Atlantis. And this is going to be more to really understand. So there's going to be, like, in part one, we really dove deep into information theory, simulation theory, and the fact that with E equals mc squared, meaning, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It's only transformed. So energy is converted to matter and vice versa. Matter is converted to energy. So when we are storing data on our electronic devices and on our technology, and keep in mind that many people believe, and this is a very, very prominent belief, that the gods are the ones that gave mankind technology. If you remember the story of the book of Enoch, which is been removed from the original biblical canon, and it starts to make sense why they would take this out of the Bible when you look at it from this point of view, from this school of thought, right? And it being that those 200 watchers, those original angels that fell, the fallen, okay, they gave mankind forbidden technology, right? They taught them how, metallurgy, and, how to paint their eyes, and, witchcraft, and just all of these different things. They taught them this forbidden information. Okay. Then we look at ruins of the ancient past and the ancient world. And one, we have no recollection or no real account of our history here on planet Earth. We don't really know where we come from. We don't know who or what built the pyramids and all of these amazing mega structures all over planet Earth that are aligned with, astrological constellations. They're aligned with the stars and, astrological energies. They are aligned on the ley lines and energy lines of the Earth. They are built with advanced methods to where they don't have 90-degree angles, because cubes and angles are used to trap energy. So it's all built with these curves, and it's this laser type precision between the stone blocks, and the stones are so heavy we couldn't even move them and put them into place today, not to mention the electrical conductivity of a lot of these places, right? They're built on platforms. They're built to conduct electricity, magnetism, use frequency and radar and sound, and it just goes on and on. And they even resemble, motherboards and circuit boards from computers. And some of the technology of the Vimanas are used in the radars of stealth bombers today. And even the pyramidal structures, the four-sided pyramid is the perfect method for the conductivity of ferrofluid and magnetism. So it just, it's amazing that we have minimized these things to saying, yeah, well, they were just tombs. They were built with copper chisels and you know shit like that, rocks and chisels, and by slaves. You know. Or we go all the way out on a limb and we say, yeah, well, it was aliens. We couldn't have even built that. Instead of looking at what the more probable, logical thing would be, is that, yes, at one point in time, humanity was far more technologically advanced and something happened and we got wiped off the face of the earth. And the reason that we put everything in stone is because we probably was aware that it was coming and we wanted to preserve our information for future generations, right? And so we put it in pictograms and hieroglyphs and symbols, because symbols are far different than, language can be misinterpreted, misunderstood. Languages are living and dead, right? Some languages, as a language is being used, it's living and it evolves. And, just like the English language, it's different in England as it is in the United States. There's different variations according to the geography of the place. 100 years ago, there was different words than there are today, right? It's still a living language. It's used. Latin, no longer used, right? Nobody knows it anymore. There's nothing being added to it. And then you take symbols. Symbols are universal, right? They speak to the subconscious, right, of the human, and they embody energetic frequencies, or entire energetic frequencies. So when you connect to a symbol and the symbolism of something, you don't have to speak the same language as that person, because we all understand these universal symbols that are representations of ideas and objects and things of that nature, right? And that's what was used, and that's what was used on a lot of these places to show us what has happened. And I even kind of put this in the first episode that, we could take it one of two ways. A, we were either being warned, and a lot of biblical text, and ancient text come from that side of the spectrum where, we're being warned against serpent technology, right? And these, and I call it serpent technology because obviously in the Garden of Eden, we have the biblical tale of, the serpent, and him offering us the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and saying that surely we won't die, that it will make us like God. And that's why God, didn't want us to have this knowledge, right? And many people believed that this knowledge was sex and reproduction. They believed it was a lot of things. And when you really start to look into it, was it technology, in general, you know? technology in general. We're going to look at different mythos and epics, and I feel like I'm getting like a little fuzz sound or something in my headphones here. But we're going to look at technology or we're going to look at the different mythos in general. We're going to look at the channelings of Edgar Cayce pertaining to Atlantis. We're going to look at Plato's Atlantis. We're going to look at the version of the Sons of the Law of One. Sorry, guys, this is driving me crazy. Sons of the Laws of One. And their interpretation of the primordial energies. And this is a book by John Peniel, from the teachings of Atlantis as well. And we're going to look at a lot of different versions of Atlantis and what actually took place, because, many people are starting to believe that within this simulation, these cyclical resets that are happening because of the entropy of the simulation itself, because this information or data, once it's deleted, once it's erased, it has to go somewhere, because E equals MC squared, energy equals matter, matter equals energy, right? And it creates dark matter, right? That the information is creating dark matter. And we know that dark matter has a force to it, and it's all over the universe, and it's essentially pulling our universe apart, right? And we have these black holes, and with event horizons and gravitational singularities and all these different theories and hypotheses, of some type of invisible force, right, that has the power to create pure chaos and destruction. And then we have all of these tales and epics and accounts of destroyers, right, that come by every so often and wreak havoc on the earth and reset the planet as we know it, and civilization as we know it. And even if we look in like the Colburn Bible and things like that, it says that when they came down from the mountain, they forgot, talking about humanity, they forgot their gods and their guides. They forgot where they came from. And what has the ability to do that? It's something with an electromagnetic nature. And this theory postulates electromagnetic disturbances. I am going to play a quick video for you guys. And this is going to be just a refresher from part one. That way, if you haven't seen part one, you'll know what we're talking about here. You'll know what we're talking about here. There it is. I believe this is it.
But it's another thing.
Right here.
If what you know is...
So this is Jordan Giorgiani from the Danny Jones podcast. And this is just a short clip of him describing this data apocalypse, from the information theory and what it entails, and postulating that perhaps this is exactly what happened to Atlantis, and these magnetic anomalies that create magnetic reversal and pole shift and crustal displacement, volcanic eruptions, tidal waves, all of this is exactly what we are getting ready to experience in present day. And it comes from technology, it comes from data. And if entities or ETs are feeding us this technology and feeding us this data, then it's, in essence, they are feeding us this destruction. And it is, in fact, probably closer to what the Bible says, with this being some sort of fallen entities that are trying, to destroy humanity, that are, bringing some sort of chaos upon us. And it's our ignorance, or, that's actually allowing it to happen. And in the times of Atlantis, they probably didn't figure this out till it was too late. And it looks like today we probably haven't figured it out till it was too late, or we won't.
that we're living in a simulation. And not only are we living in a simulation, we're living in a simulation with a computational ceiling. that we cannot exceed a certain level of data production. You understand? That's a cap on our civilization. So yeah, this is in my book, Satanion. And the chapter is called Catastrophic Information, because there's a physicist recently who's looked at all of this, and he conceptualizes this as an information catastrophe. Melvin Vopson. He's working at a university in Britain, I believe. He's, I think, Romanian originally, but he's working in UK. And he calls it the information catastrophe because, look, at a certain point, we're going to reach a critical mass of data, which will have geophysically catastrophic effects. Oh, here's the other thing. So I investigated what would be the geophysical effects of reaching a critical mass of data. Guess what? It turns out to be every single catastrophe that's been held responsible for the destruction of Atlantis. So all these, you have all these theorists from like Plato, all the way back Plato, to Senator Ignatius Donnelly in the 1800s with his book Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, to Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson. All these people talking about the various catastrophes.
Don't forget Flint Dibble.
The various catastrophes that might have destroyed the civilization. And by the way, just on a quick side note, you cannot argue with 1,300 ton megaliths in Baalbek, Lebanon, which are fitted together with razor precision, and you can't even slip a razor blade between the joints. You cannot argue with that, okay? Or those, exactly. The Egyptians had those too, and who knows who they got them from.
Right.
And with what tools they were made.
Perfectly symmetrical.
Yeah.
How do they man a computer?
Yeah. So this civilization existed, okay? And there are all these geophysical catastrophes that have been postulated as the cause for the destruction of this worldwide, highly advanced technical culture, right? Guess what? If you wind up with a moon's mass worth of data at Silicon Valley or in China, you know what winds up happening? Every single thing that anyone's ever held responsible for the destruction of Atlantis. Number one, the crust sinks underneath the data center. Number two, it creates a tidal force like the moon does. So the oceans get pulled in toward the data center.
And we're going to look
Crust
at this.
sinks, there's a massive flood. It causes earthquakes because it activates the gravitational pull from the servers, activates all the tectonic plates. So you wind up also with massive earthquakes. The same gravitational pull sets off volcanoes. So you get volcanoes going off all over the planet. Potentially, the gravitational disturbance would also even tilt the axis of the Earth, which is something that many people from Charles Hapgood onward have postulated was responsible for the destruction of Atlantis.
And just today, a suspicious observer posted a video. Now NOAA, and this is science here, right? This is real science, is posting or tracking the magnetic position of the magnetic pole of the Earth, right? And I showed this in the first video, how the migration of the magnetic pole, and we're going to look at actual documents today, right, of the position of these poles, right? And we're going to show different documents that have recently come out, on climate reports, actually showing the migration of these things and the deviation in the length of the day and everything. So scientifically, these are the things that happen right before the magnetic pole takes off and we do a total reversal. And suspicious observer, which he worked at NASA, he actually went as far to say that he believes that by 2030 to 2050 is the timeline of this. 2030 to 2050. So that's think about Agenda 2030. And then think about the global agenda for 2050. Why are these years so important for the UN, and the world community, the international community as a whole, right? So let's go ahead and jump into the Atlantis now. And I believe first. Okay. We're going to start with Plato's version of Atlantis here. So, in the Timaeus. The next passage in Plato's works, which has a reference to Atlantis in his Critias, which purports to be an account by a person of that name of the circumstances of life in Atlantis as recounted by Solon to Japetus, the speaker's great-grandfather, 9,000 years before Solon's day, or about 9600 BC. War broke out between the nations within the Pillars of Hercules and those beyond them. And I don't want to get too speculative here, but when I think of the Pillars of Hercules and those beyond them, it doesn't make me think of like the physical pillars of Hercules on the earth. It actually makes me, Hercules was a demigod or a human, and those beyond them. It kind of makes me think of like a heavenly war versus the earth, just to keep it real. Athens placed herself at the head of the eastern peoples, and the kings of the Isle of Atlantis led the western races. Atlantis was an isle greater than Asia and Libya together, but it was swallowed up by a convulsion of the earth, and its site is now marked by a dangerous quicksands which render the sea routes in that region unnavigable. At this early period, Athens was possessed of extensive territories. Her lands were fertile and her inhabitants numerous. As regards the Atlanteans, Critias explains that his hearers that he must render the names of their heroes into Greek. Solon, who had written an account of their history in verse, found that the priest of Sias had already given these names an Egyptian aspect. He would thus take a similar liberty, but would retain their significance. His ancestor had possessed an account of these things in writing, but he, Critias, was compelled to rely on his memory for the facts which he had heard in his childhood and which had deeply impressed themselves in his mind. The gods divided the earth into portions both great and small, and to Poseidon or Neptune, god of the sea, he had been awarded the Isle of Atlantis. And remember, Poseidon, the god Neptune, when we look at like the primordial entities, he was the one that mated with Gaia, with the earth, that this is, uh, the water with the earth. This would also be like the accounts with the Anunnaki, where Ea or Enki, he was Lord of the water first, then he became Lord of the earth. So his name first was Ea, then it changed to Enki. So these are similarities with this. The island, which was now not mountainous near the seacoast, had in amidst a plain, which is said to have no equal for beauty and fertility. About 6 miles from this plain stood a low mountain where dwelt an aboriginal inhabitant or autochthone called Evanor, who by his wife Lucippe had a daughter called Cleito. This girl, after the death of her parents, was espoused by Poseidon, who environed the mountain with mounds and ditches. And remember Inky also, when he made like Adamu and TT, right, which was Adam and Eve, basically, when he actually put his seed into mankind, which, remember, if we look at biblical accounts as well, it was the fallen, right, who came unto the daughters of men, so they had sex with women. Okay. And when Inky, he found 2 fair-breasted young women, and he put his seed in them, right? He parked a spaceship and banged them. So, just saying. Which were filled with water, and the mounds were 2 in number, and the 3 ditches, which were filled with water from the sea, were placed at an equal distance, one from the other, and rendered access to the mount impossible. The art of navigation was at this time unknown. Poseidon also set in the island 2 currents of water, one hot, the other cold, which assisted in fertilization exceedingly. And I know that so many people think that this is a physical account, and And I'm not saying that it isn't, because I believe that everything is multidimensional, meaning it takes place astrologically, right, in the heavenly celestial spheres. It also takes place collectively. It takes place individually, anatomically, geographically. Like, everything's happening simultaneously at once, because our consciousness is what manifests and creates all of this. That spark of life, that golden ratio, right, is repeating. That Fibonacci sequence is repeating within everything. So it's like, that's how reality is, like this mirrored reality here. So I just want you to kind of think of that. This is also something speaking to the subconscious as well, and has a spiritual connotation. Okay. The god reared in this enchanted place 5 pairs of male children. And see, like, and even just to kind of say, like, to show you this, like the universal numbers of the numbers of the earth are 2, 3, and 5, right? And you see, look, 2 mounds were 2 in numbers, 3 ditches, they were filled with water from the sea, right? And then the separation of the waters above the firmament, the waters below, right? They were placed at equal distance, one from the other, and rendered access to the mount impossible. And remember, the mountains in the Bible, or Mount Zion, right, is either like the pineal or it's the heavens, right? It's, it's God, the mount impossible. So I just want to, tell you there is an esoteric nature to this, definitely. The art of navigation and navigation, these are the seas, right, of the heavens, right? So that's why they're called space ships, right? That's why the dock tour is what delivers you, and the ships are feminine. They're carrying goods or product, right? Which is you, you being born, or delivered or birthed, right, into the world. And then they prick you on the sole of your feet, all of this, right? That's why they have that, the whole maritime law and the legal ease within our world, because it all descends from the heavens first, as above, so below. The art of navigation was at this time unknown. Poseidon also set in the island 2 currents of water, which is, duality. Also, one hot, the other cold, which assisted in fertilization exceedingly. The god reared in this enchanted place 5 pairs of male children. And remember, male represents the mind, it represents the physical as well. Twins, right? And it's 2 brothers that start civilization, right? We are not only are we dualistic beings, right? We have the left, right brain, like all of that. We're split in 2, of whom he was the father. He divided Atlantis into 10 parts. He bestowed on his eldest born the maternal domain, right, which is the feminine, the mother, which was the largest and best situated, which would be like Pistis Sophia, and that's like the 10th dimension, right? So notice it's 10, right? Just saying. What is being described to me is not like how many people go looking for this place. Just saying. He was, and it's not to say there wasn't a civilization of Atlantis. I believe that this is just describing like the original humans, and we were so technologically advanced because we had these ethereal beings handing us down this super, super advanced knowledge that were actually the ones who genetically altered or engineered us and placed us in this simulation and created this, this firmament, or terrarium that we lived in, or terraformed it, whoever, if you think about the tales of the Anunnaki and them destroying Tiamat and putting it into pieces, and all of that, it's like it looks as if they created the way station at Mars. And the last one we even talked about, the channelings of the Mars exploration of Project Stargate and what they seen there. These, it's it really does all start to make sense when you look at it from this point. I'm not trying to go too spaced out and too out there for people, but you really should watch part 1 if you haven't seen it in order to understand where we're going with this. This is going to be a little bit different than that because it's going to, and that's why I'm glad it's split up the way it has, because this is such a different take on things. Now, which was the largest and best situated and established the remaining princes. And remember, princes are angels, they're planets, they're heavenly hosts, they're messengers, they're watchers, they're archons. So I'm just saying, like Michael, who was like God, is his name, Michael, the archangel. He is the great prince, Michael, and the other regions of Atlantis as chiefs of different nations, like chief archons. Get it? Nations being flights of locusts. Okay. And this is all, Hebrew etymology. So just to, give you the base of where this is coming from, where I'm giving you these words are from. Atlantis as chiefs of different nations. And when we look at the destruction comes from the east and all of this, right? Like in the north, meaning the hidden or the deep, so these are the 4 cardinal directions, the 4 principal elements, the 4 banners or ensigns of the book of Revelation, or the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? The archangels, the names of God, which also make up the tetragrammaton as well, right? You might also know it as news, north, east, west, south. Yeah. So, and I bet you, and I'm sure there are people that's broke Plato's down like this, but I doubt there's a lot of people who have. I don't know, if there is, and some people will think this is just nonsense or, hogwash or whatever, but it's just because they don't have an esoteric understanding, truly. Because it makes perfect sense if you've studied this. And on this channel, we have dove so deep into things like this for such a long time. And it should be obvious and evident to the people that watch me a lot. Atlantis as chiefs of different nations. The name of the eldest son was Atlas, who was the king of the entire island. And from him, the Atlantic Ocean takes its name, right? Because Atlas means of the Atlantic, right? And don't even get me into Comet Atlas and all that. We'll say that for another day. But Gadir, and in the Greek, Eumelus. And he had for his portion the extremity of the island near the Pillar of Hercules. And that part of it has since borne the name Gadiric. And let's see what the name actually means here. Let's look up that name. The word Gadiric appears to be a misspelling or variation of geriatric, which means relating to old age or the elderly. Gadiri in India is the name of a plant. Godric, God's ruler. Wow. I mean, Godric means God's ruler or God's power. These are interesting. Where is it at here? So, and isn't that interesting that the part of it has been born the name Godiric, and it's like it comes Godric, right? God's ruler. And also think about Gadriel, right? Right there, God, Gadriel. And he's the ruler, right? He's one of the twins, right? His twin brother, the 2 brothers, Enki, Enlil, right? Lucifer, Jesus, Satan, whatever, right? Paginhoya, Paengaahoya, Quetzalcoatl, Tetzicalapoca, right? I can go on and on with the two brothers story, right? The warrior and the shepherd. This is always, the creation mythos, no matter what religion, no matter what nation, no matter what period and age, this is always how it starts. Okay. And his portion is the extremity, meaning the external, right? It's the physical world of the island near the Pillars of Hercules, right? And Pillars of Hercules, think about also the Pillars of Heliopolis, right? Helios, the sun god, right? I told you, Hercules represents man, right? Or the demigod. We're half man, half gods, basically, right? So this is like humans, this is saying like the physical world. This is what he rule over. And his twin brother, Atlas of the Atlantic. Atlas holds up the earth, right? He holds up the world, right? And he was the king of the entire island, right? Entire island. And I don't want to get all deeply into the island thing, but the island basically does mean the physical or land. Anytime you look at land, earth, or land, island, dirt, it always refers to the earth. So earth or the physical. And from the Atlantic takes its name. His twin brother was called, in the Atlantean language, Gadir, right? Which is God. Just saying. The next pair of twins were called Amphisus and Eudaimon, and the others respectively Nicias and Autochthonus, Asclepius and Mestor, Asius and Diaprepus. These princes, and how many were there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? 8. Representing the other celestial body. So and think about it. There would be 10 in all if we count, right? The sun and the moon, right? Something like that. 9 or 10 in all. So something like that. These princes reigned in prosperity of the island for several centuries. In the island for several centuries, meaning they reigned over cycles, right? Over cycles. And established a supremacy in the midst of the ocean over many other islands, as well as over those which are near Egypt and Tyrrhenia. The posterity of Atlas maintained the sovereign power during several centuries in uninterrupted succession. Their riches were so great that they surpassed those of the kings who lived in the centuries preceding their own. And no monarch of the succeeding ages could in this respect compare with them. By their wise, and this is the crazy part. So when they say this right here, the posterity of Atlas is the modern age, by the way, is what it looks like it is. And this, so they're telling us how our world is going to end, in my opinion, right? Just saying. And there's nothing new under the sun, right? So these cycles or ages repeat themselves over and over and over. And if you're living in a simulation, that means it's a program, right? And it's like a movie, right? Running on fucking repeat, just keeping it real. And prophecy isn't some profound thing. It's just somebody that's from outside of the simulation, or somebody who's watched the movie before, telling you how it ends, right? Because they're timeless. If we think of and I've explained this in the past, like this time, and we know that, Kronos, Saturn, Satan, the ruler, that the first king of the extremity of the earth, right, is the ruler of time. That's why it's like the represented by the number 6. We have the 369, right, of the firmament or the dimensions, or how this works, right? Like the inner, the middle, which is earth, and the underworld, which is inside, right? The triune being. Then 6 represents physical man, 6 carbon, 666, right? Time, 60 seconds, right? 24 hours, 2 plus 4 is 6, right? 60 minutes, all of that, 666. So it's like time, right? The Masonic cube of Saturn, 1 plus 5, 1 plus 5, 666. That's why you keep getting that number, and it's a cube, it's a trap, it traps energy, right? And we see that everywhere within ourselves, right? That's what the physical is about. And then the 9, because there's 10 dimensions. So 9 within and that 1 on the external, because God, the creator, stands with what? His foot on the vault of the universe, meaning he's outside of the simulation because he made it, right? So those would be those 10 dimensions, okay? And even if we look at like, Ragnarok, it even talks about like, how, that, or Jacob's ladder, right? It's like, it's always like this going up of this chain or this ladder, right? And then falling back down, So it's like a cycle over and over and over. That's why it appears as if every time humanity reaches like this high point of civilization or high point of consciousness, we're destroyed, because like Giorgiani referred to, and we talked about in part 1, was it appears as if we have like a cap on ourselves here. We have been capped. Not only do we only use 10% of our brain, not only do we see 0.0013% of the electromagnetic light spectrum, not only have we only discovered 5% of the observable universe, not only does it appear as if someone has soldered or altered our telomeres and we can only live 120 years. So not all of these different things, our 5 senses, the limitations of the physical body, right? The poisoning of the air, the water, our food, all of these different things, right? The fragmentation of ourselves and how we're in conflict with the dualistic nature, all of it. It appears as if, because E equals mc squared, matter equals energy, right? That, there is an energetic cap, right? So civilization can never go past a tier 1 civilization, right? Because because of entropy and because the way that the simulation is designed. So we can never ascend past. We'll never ascend past those gods. That's just a lie. We were tricked. When we came down here, we were definitely tricked. So that's why they're like, don't eat that tree. Surely you will die. And they fucking meant it. Surely you will, because you'll never ascend past that level. You won't be like God. You got trapped. So the posterity of Atlas maintained the sovereign power during several centuries of uninterrupted succession. And see what they're describing here. Their riches were so great that they surpassed those of the kings who lived in the centuries preceding their own. Now think about, kings, right? They're rulers, right? Governors, monarchs, the royalty, right? And the preceding and no monarch of the succeeding ages could compare. And then think about the battle of the gods, right? The Olympians versus the Titans, you think about Elohim, Nephilim, right? Then you think about, Anunnaki, Ajiji, right? Like, so there's always like, and even before the Titans, there were, what are they called? The ethereal beings. So it's like every creation mythos has, like the demiurge, archons, demons, like there's like a hierarchy of the gods, right? And humanity at the bottom of that hierarchy, but ages in the past, were even greater gods, but supposedly the gods that have been ruling over us, that trapped us, tricked us, the fallen angels, are the greatest of them all. That's why they're saying no ages could compare with what they've done. By their wise industry, they filled the capital city and the country with everything that was useful and agreeable to existence. Their power procured them all the productions of foreign lands. Their island furnished them with all kinds of stones and minerals, and above all, with that mineral known as orichalcum, or mountain copper. Now, this is fucking crazy. The orichalcum thing, let's pull this up. I've looked at this before. It's been a while. Orichalcum. Golden yellow metal alloy. And you see it looks like fucking gold. Composed of copper with zinc, with small amounts of other metals like lead, tin, and nickel. It was used in ancient times for making coins, with the Romans specifically using it for sestertius and dupondius coins. The name orichalcum comes from the Greek word ordos, mountain, and kalkos, copper, right? And earrings, armor, other objects. And I want you to think about like those fallen angels, the watchers in the book of Enoch, right? What did they do? They taught us how to do what? Wear earrings, make weapons and armor, this, right? The monetary system. So this orichalcum and copper, which was everything in ancient Egypt. Copper is a conduit, and copper is also synonymous with Venus and Lucifer, so and Oros as in Ouroboros, right? Oros, right? So, and those are just some things I find strange, right? And it's mountain copper. And like I said, remember, mountain or stone, like cornerstone. Mountain is always like, the sky, the heavenly, realm. Remember, the gods lived on Mount Olympus. So I'm just giving you some ideas of this. The island also produced in abundance all kinds of timber suitable for building construction. It nourished numerous herds of animals, and there's like the shepherd aspect, right? These found plenty of food in the marshes, lakes, and rivers, in the plains and the mountains. The soil also produced a wealth of roots, wood, gums, flowers, and fruits, the sweet juice of the grape, and corn. All desirable vines and vegetables in their season. Shady trees sheltered its happy people, and diverse fruits appeased their hunger and thirst, especially one with a hard rind, affording both meat, drink, and ointment. In a word, there was to be found in this island, which has so unhappily disappeared, everything which could satisfy the body, the spirit, and engender piety towards the gods. By means of these natural riches, the Atlanteans built temples, palaces, bridges, directing the waters, which flowed in a triple circle around their ancient metropolis in a useful manner. They began by constructing bridges over the zones of the sea and another leading to the royal palace. They greatly increased this building in size and in beauty with each successive reign, and drove a canal through the zones of land 300 feet in width and about 100 feet deep and about 60 miles in length. And the landward end of this waterway, which was capable of navigation by the largest vessels, they constructed a harbor. The two zones of land were cut by large canals, by which means a trireme or three-decked galley was able to pass from one sea zone to another. The bridges by means of which communication had between the land zones were sufficiently high to permit the passage of vessels, and these were roofed over. The first sea zone was about 1,800 feet wide, the second about 1,200 feet, and the third, which immediately encircled the island, was about 600 feet in width. The diameter of the island on which the palace stood was 5 stadia, or about 1,000 yards. The isle in each zone was enclosed by stone walls. At the entrance to the bridges were gates surmounted by defending towers. The bridges at the principal entrance about 100 feet wide. The stone of which these immense piles were constructed was quarried from the island and was black and red in color. The walls which encircled the outward zone were covered with a light coating of brass. And the brass age is like the first age, by the way. And that was the outward zone. That's interesting. And on the interior, it had plates of tin, and the walls of the citadel were coated with orichalcum. The place with the citadel was planned as follows. And keep in mind, each mineral and metal represents planets as well. So, or parts of the chakras. The palace within the citadel was planned as follows. In the middle and most inaccessible part was a temple of Plato and Poseidon, glittering with gold. Here, the descendants of the first Atlanteans gathered each year to offer pious sacrifices to the gods. The temples of Poseidon was about 600 feet in length, 3 acres square, and of a height proportionate to its length and breadth. But its architecture was barbaric. The whole of its exterior was garnished with silver, its pinnacles glittered with gold, and the interior was roofed with ivory, gold, silver, and flashing orichalcum. But orichalcum prevailed on the decoration of the interior walls. Panels and statues, although, were also the statues of the purest gold, grasping the reins of winged coursers. Around him were a group of nereids borne by dolphins, and other contiguous sculptures represented the princesses and princes of the royal line, and other effigies of votive gifts of the kings and people of the Atlantean Empire. The sacrificial altar, by its grandeur and beauty, was worthy of the magnificence of the temple, and indeed was the remainder of the royal edifice. In various parts of the city were situated hot springs and fountains of cold water, both of which flowed in abundance. Great baths were constructed, some opened, others walled and roofed in, and hot baths for use in winter. There were baths for the royal family, others were reserved for women, and even horses and other domestic animals had bathing pools of their own. Each bath was constructed with due regard to decency and the convenience of several classes which it served. Each of the 2 zones of the city was filled with temples, shrines, groves, and gymnasiums. Near the midst of the central island stood a large circular hippodrome, 600 feet in diameter. Round this hippodrome were arranged the dwellings of the court officials and the guards. The soldiers of the royal guard were lodged near the castle, around the mountain which it crowned. But those most trusted had their abode within the castle itself. And okay, so yeah, well, one thing I kind of like just want to point out, when it says that this place that once existed, to me, one of the things that really it kind of makes like just comes to mind when I think about this is like one, we're being told, excuse me, we're being told of the first like the hierarchy of the creation and the structure of which if you look at like the book of Enoch, it does a very similar thing, talking about the gates in which the sun and the moon come out of, right? Basically like the working mechanisms of uh of creation. So to me, when it talks about Atlantis once was, but now is not, could this even be like, kind of, and this is, just a theory, or, you can call it a reach, whatever, but could this be telling us of like what our simulation is modeled after, even, like we could be being told, and then I kind of look at this in one of 2 ways. It's like either A, we're being told of uh just like the Bible kind of outlays the same things, right? It'll tell you, like temples and things like that, and it's giving you measurements. And a lot of times those measurements are just really akin to the physical body or to the earth itself, shit like that, or have a spiritual connotation to it. This is the same, right? And see, each one is talking about chariots, 10 chariots with 2 horses, etc., etc. The chariots of the gods, right? These are like, I'm just saying, it has this whole type of principle we see in other ancient texts. So it's like either outline, what the basic structure of the earth and what it's like, and the heavens, and the system, the simulation itself, you know, and telling you the story of its destruction to be, or this is the simulation is a version modeled after the original Earth, and this destruction has already happened, and like we're living in like a fake version of this, right? Like a copy of what once took place. And I would actually be interested. Um, oh, thank you. Uh, so you got some people, and I would actually be very interested to hear like what people think of as far as you know uh, that theory or that principle. Like, do you believe that it is possible, which would be more possible or probable, or which would be more likely, that either A, we are living in a simulation, and we're being told of like the measurements, or kind of like the mechanisms, the moving parts of it, and it's being laid out in that manner, and we're being told of this impending destruction, possibly because we can avoid this, right? Which would be great. I just say we're living in a clown world pretty much sums it all up. Yeah, that is um that does pretty much sum it all up, truth be told. But it's like, would it be fair to say that, we're living in something like that, and we're being told of an impending doom, something that can be avoided, or perhaps that we are living in a model or a simulation of something that was already destroyed, right? I'm just interested to kind of hear of like what people would think about that. Either way, we're going to actually jump now to more of, I find this a little bit more interesting. I don't want to drone on with that too long, but we're going to look at the sons of the Law of One, and Bilal and Edgar Casey, and all of their different ideas when it comes to Atlantis as well. Right. I like to pull from different sources so we get like a good understanding. And I found this Substack, and it's just fucking captivating. It's interesting. So over time, with the advent of civilization and technology in Atlantis, the divisions, and this is describing this conflict, right, in Atlantis. And then we'll get to the Edgar Casey stuff and all of that. And then as we get into the cataclysmic parts of this, I've got real evidence that shows we're heading towards pole shift and all of that, magnetic reversal, and I've got quite a bit of other stuff to kind of like look at past destructions, and so it's some interesting stuff still to come. Stick with it. Over time, with the advent of civilization and technology in Atlantis, the divisions between the Adamic and pre-Adamic races became increasingly more apparent. Whereas the Adamic race held on to the belief in the one God who had specially created them, and the pre-Adamic race refuted the belief in the existence of God. Instead of focusing on the acquisition of wealth and power, worshiping the creature rather than the creator. As these differences became more and more clear, the world came to be divided into two basic divisions: the sons of the law of one, which I would, these would be like the children of light, and those who held to the belief in the one God as the creator of the universe and of mankind, and the sons of Belial, those who denied the existence of God and instead worshiped themselves. And to this day, this is what I'm saying. When it comes to Atlantis, this is the real mind blowing fucking part. And many people believe where Atlantis is. Do you guys know, right? That the ruins of Atlantis are right off of the coast of, Florida, Bermuda Triangle, shit like that, United States, right? The continent of North America. So there's just some weird similarities with that, and that the United States could even be ancient Egypt. I've heard that, or the old Phoenicia. Like, I've heard that. There's many theories that say our land here in the U.S., and we are the world power. There's no doubt about that. We are modern day Babylon. There's no doubt about that. So this could be Atlantis could be a prophetical type of thing where, it's talking about a prophetical thing, something that once existed in the past and is existing again today, or just warning us of something that's going to happen, or it is currently happening, it appears, uh, or something that once happened and is kind of on repeat and that we need to learn from and avoid, that way it don't happen again. However you look at it, there's something to it, and you're always going to find with the Atlantis stuff, there's going to be a far more spiritual, conscious side to this too, as opposed to what we've seen in the first part. So, in Atlantean land, and you can see too, the sons of the Law of One, right? Like the Law of One, Ra, right? The sun god, sun worshippers, children of the light, and then Baal, this is Baal, right? Baal, that's the Canaanites, those Moloch, right? The sacrificing the children and, worshiping money, right? Gold, all of that shit, right? So, those who deny the existence of God, or Satan, whatever, those who deny the existence of God and instead worship themselves. So, do what thou wilt, thy will be done, right? Casey explained it as thus. In Atlantean land, during those periods of early rise of the sons of Belial as oppositions that became more and more materialized, as the powers were applied for self-aggrandizement, this self-aggrandizement took the form of the accumulation of wealth and power into the hands of very few, with the result being extreme social stratification where perhaps only a few dozen or hundreds of beings ruled over millions of slaves. This situation, of course, was unacceptable to the sons of Law of One. Now, think about that. We're in a very similar situation today. We truly are. Where you have the 1% of the 1%. Let's think about that. It's like it really is down to hundreds, right, of people. There's not a lot, that truly rule the world. We find that in those periods, there was not a laboring for the sustenance of life as in the present, but rather individuals who were children of the Law of One and some who were the children of Belial in the early experience were served by automatons or things that were retained by individuals or groups to do the labors of a household or to cultivate the field or the like, or to perform the activities of artisans. And it was concerning these things about which much of the disturbing forces grew to be factors to be reckoned with between the children of the Law of One and the sons of Belial. Now, I want you to listen to this. These things, right? They were served by automatons, right? Now, let's go into this here. Let's go ahead and get dirty. Let's get our hands dirty. These automatons, these things, an automaton is a machine or device, typically mechanical or electromechanical, that operates with minimal or no human input. It can be a self-operating mechanism designed to follow a sequence of operations or respond to pre-programmed instructions. The term also refers to individuals or entities acting in a mechanical or repetitive manner. The term also refers to individuals or entities acting in a mechanical or repetitive manner. And this goes right to the simulation, does it not? With NPCs, non-player characters, and then the two types of simulation. You have the RPG, the role player game, right? Where you are the main character, and then the NPCs, the non-player characters. Mechanical and electromechanical devices range from simple clockwork devices to complex robots, both theoretical and real, that transform information or perform tasks based on predetermined instructions. Self-operating, set in motion, many automatons can continue their designated sequence of actions without further intervention. Various electromechanical devices, robotic systems, even figures that imitate human actions. Human action is called machine learning. That's artificial intelligence. The term automaton can be used metaphorically to describe individuals or things that act in a robotic or routine manner without active thoughts or feelings, right? So there you have it. These things, these automatons, right? It was AI, guys. It was AI. It was robots, you know? This is what they had. Isn't that interesting? We find ourselves in such a similar thing. So we have, the sons of the law of one, those who believe in the one God, right? Usually the sun God on top of that, right? Like Jesus and right? Uh, and then those who believe in Baal or Baal, right? Which is the whole satanic side of the child sacrifice and worshiping the money. And the rulers was, down to a few dozen or hundreds of people. So 1% of the 1% ruling over millions of slaves. Okay. And the situation had become unacceptable to the mass, those who were, worshiping the one God. And there's no laboring for the sustenance of life, which we're not laboring for the sustenance of life today, truly, right? We have amenities and riches and everything, if you really think about it. And we were served by automatons or things, and that's what we are now, right? We have the Internet of Things, fuck the Internet of Bodies. So these things could even go that far, so we could always look at this from a couple of different vantage points. Either one, as this is like a present story being told, we are being told of our own present course that we are on, right? And possible future or prophetic future, or the past, and it's something that repeats itself, right? As a warning. Much like the issue of slavery, which in the 19th century sparked off a bloody civil war in America, this division over the treatment of the slaves, among other things, appears to have touched off a civil conflict in Atlantis, which led to the first destruction of Atlantis. Atlantean high technology and the first destruction. Now, while the sons of the Law of One were busy developing tools of mass instruction about God and his plans for mankind, the sons of Belial had been hard at work at developing weapons of mass destruction in order to enslave mankind. Does this not sound familiar? Right? While we're online, we're posting fucking memes and creating content to try to enlighten people and awaken them and, right, create unity and togetherness and to shine a light on the dark things of the world, right? You have those behind the curtain, right, that are manipulating things to destroy, to sow division. Very similar, guys. Very, very similar. In Atlantean land at the time of withdrawing from the Law of One, establishment of the Sons of Belial, the entity, was a priestess in the temple built in opposition to the Sons of the Law of One. Oh, really? This was an entity, which was a priestess in the temple built in opposition. So would this priestess be the whore of Babylon, right? Whore of Babylon. Lady Babylon, right? Or Hecate, right? She's got quite a few different names, but the whore of Babylon. It's priestess, who is in the temple in opposition to the Law of One. During the time when there was the creating of the high influence of the radioactivity from rays of the sun that were turned on crystals and the pits that made connections with internal influences of the earth. From the sound of this, it appears that in Atlantis, the peaceful coexistence and possible intermarriage between the sons of the Law of One and the children of Baal ceased, and two distinct factions developed. The sons of Belial had apparently tired of the compassionate, humanistic approach of the sons of the Law of One, and instead of using their technological prowess to help benefit mankind, tried to use it to conquer the world. The Atlanteans, both the sons of the Law of One and the children of Belial, had developed high technology using crystals and solar energy that they used to create electrical power for lighting, heating, travel, and related needs. The Sons of Belial, however, broke ranks with the Sons of the Law of One and attempted to use that technology as a weapon. According to Casey, the children of Belial had actually developed the technology to the point where they were able to not only harness the power of the sun, but the volcanic forces of the earth itself. However, they foolishly underestimated the power that they unleashed, and instead of releasing themselves from the yoke of the Law of One and conquering the world, they instead brought destruction on themselves and great damage to the island of Atlantis in the process. Now, here we go. Does it not seem that the children, the sons of Baal, could even be, like the whole like reptilian faction or fallen angels, or like we really see a lot of that mimicked within that too, or present within that. And they were trying to get out of the yoke of the children of the Law of One, right? Those who serve the one creator, basically, right? And instead of conquering the world and all of this, okay, and they were able to harness the power of the sun. We have sun simulators today, right? Volcanic forces. We have earthquake machines. I mean, if you think about it, there truly is nothing new under the sun. They caused great damage to the island of Atlantis in the process. And what I really hoped that I was able to illustrate by reading some of Plato's Atlantis, you were able to see that Atlantis is actually the Earth, right? It's actually the Earth. In the Atlantean land during those periods of time when there were destructions or separations of the land during the period of the first destruction, the entity was among those who aided in the preparation of the explosives, or those things that set in motion the fires of the inner portions of the earth that were turned into destructive forces. That's interesting too. And the entity was among those. So, that spirit who aided in the preparation of explosives or the things that set in motion fires of the inner portions of the earth that were turned into destructive forces, right? So the fires represent like fire beings or the smokeless fire, right? Like archons. These are like the fallen angels, right? Seraphic entities, right? Seraphim, fallen angels that were turned into destructive forces, right? Destructive forces, this inner fire, right? Fire represents magic, spiritual magic, okay? The children of Belial attempted to harness the volcanic forces of the earth in order to defeat the power of the sun, or we can even think of it as a physical, as well, or defeat the power of the sons of the Law of One and enslave mankind, but instead they brought great destruction to the island of Atlantis. As a result of their arrogance, they released forces that they were unable to completely control. And the resulting release of volcanic energy resulted in the division of the island of Atlantis into several lesser islands, right? So it went from Pangea, probably, to what we see today, okay? With substantial portion of the island falling into the sea. The use of these devices by the sons of Belial brought then the first of the upheavals, or the turning of the rays from the sun, and used by the sons of the Law of One into the crystal for the activities of the same, produce what we would call a volcanic upheaval, right? Crystal displacement, right? Magnetic reversal, pole shift, and separating of the lands into several islands, 5 in number. Poseidia, right, which Poseidon, right, then became one of these islands. This was the end of the first age of Atlantis. The second great age. Atlantis had been greatly damaged but not destroyed by the arrogance and power displayed by the sons of Belial. The majority of the original continent remained, though it was now separated into 5 lesser islands, the greatest of which was the island of Poseidia. It was here that the sons of the Law of One remained steadfast in their beliefs in God and their mission to serve mankind. Having been proven clearly right by the disastrous failure of the children of Belial, the sons of the Law of One continued developing technologies for the betterment of mankind. In the Atlantean land during those periods of greater expansion as to ways, means, and manners of applying greater conveniences for the people of the land, things of transportation. The aeroplane, as called by today, was in use. But then as ships of the air, for they sailed not only on the air, but other elements also. And I wonder if this is of like a Tartaria, right? Tartaria, where, we could see Zeppelins. Right? See Zeppelins and aeroships and everywhere across the world, right? On these giant structures and monoliths and monuments, had a place to park your aeroship, you know? Just wonder if this was Tartaria, where we seen like the, moving sidewalks and, they had electric vehicles and just all types of things that, we think were are brand new, but have been around, for quite a while, technology, advanced technology. And everything was positive. It was like, they harnessed energy from, the ether, right? Like Tesla technology using, copper to as a conduit and mercury, right? In order to kind of, to spin, and gold to make it spin as an element to charge these ethereal antennas, and bells, right, to create vibration and energy and sound and color, and it was all natural forces. Okay. And it says in the elements also, the technological advances allowed the sons of Law of One to develop ships that would allow them to travel through the air, on the land, and under the water, just as we have today. Moreover, they also had developed forms of wireless communication, just the same as we have developed today. And the city of Pios and Atlantis, among people who gained understandings of application on the night side of life or negative influences in the earth's spheres, of those who gave much understanding to the manner of sound, voice, and picture, and such to the peoples of that period. And Poseidia, the entity, dwelt among those that had charge of the storage of the motivative forces from the great crystals that so condense the lights, the forms of the activities, as to guide the ships in the sea and in the air, and inconveniences of the body as television and recording voice. Wow. Wow. The level of technology of Atlantis, even after the first destruction, was roughly the same as it is today, Earth circa 2003 AD, including television, radio, and probably the same type of home entertainment systems that are available today. Their ability to travel was also the same that is used today, including rapid forms of air, land, and sea. In fact, for all intents and purposes, Atlantis at its peak was probably nearly indistinguishable from America of the present day, including the social and cultural divisions we're currently experiencing with the rise of immorality. The Atlanteans were becoming decadent, being broken up owing to the disputes between the children of the law of one and the children of the law. The level of technology available to the average person at that time was impressive, and apparently the technology was available for a good long time, as a period before the first and second destruction of Atlantis was roughly 40,000 years, according to Casey's timeline. However, as it is today, technology invariably finds its way into military uses, and the children of Belial, having forgotten the lessons of the past, again began experimenting with forbidden technologies from the night side of life, what we would today call the dark side. The terrible mighty crystal. Casey often mentioned in his visions powerful crystals through which tremendous energies were harnessed. He also frequently mentioned the military uses that these technologies were frequently put to, uses which went far beyond self-defense to clearly offensive and intrusive purposes. In the Atlantean land at that time of development of electrical forces that dealt with transportation of craft from place to place, photographing at a distance, reading inscriptions through walls, even at a distance, overcoming gravity itself, and preparation of the crystal, the terrible, mighty crystal. Much of this brought destruction. before the second destruction, when there was the dividing of the islands, when the temptations were begun in activities of sons of Belial and children of the law of one entity among those that interpreted the messages received through the crystals and the fires that were to be the eternal fire of nature. The entity that Casey was receiving his information from was once one of the sons of Belial, who once again began using the crystal technology for offensive purposes. And think about it, Silicon Valley, this is crystal technology, dude. Just saying, it's computers, right? Not just crystal skulls and shit that they feed you, with the ancient astronaut shit on Ancient Aliens. I'm talking about actual, silicon crystals and shit like that, computers, quantum computers, and things like that. Like our modern satellites, these techniques could see over long distances, even through solid barriers, and could even deliver energy over long distances for constructive or destructive purposes, which would also be like directed energy weapons. The whole Atlantean power structure was apparently based upon one or more of these giant crystals, which was the Atlanteans referred to as the Firestone. Sounds like a giant fucking quantum computer. About the Firestone, the entity's activities that made such applications as dealt both with constructive as well as destructive forces in that period. And see, and remember, Firestone, right? Stone, and we've talked about this, like cornerstone, Christ is the cornerstone. They say, faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Mountains, are representative of elements and metals and entities, right? So, giants or gods. And the living stone, the living rock, right? Like, so you see where that allegory can come from. And then fire, right? God's throne, right? It's got fire stones and all of that around it, right? Where the cherubim and the seraphim are, right? Like I said, the fire represents like magic, like an ethereal fire, right? Seraphic, smokeless fire, archonic fire as well. So fire stone, right? And you can think of like maybe like Ark of the Covenant or some type of quantum computer. That's what I think it is when it's talking about there's an entity within this Firestone, and it was housed in the center of a building, which would today be said to be lined with non-conductive stone, right? So there was something non-conductive because this thing was so conductive, right? The building above the stone was oval, and see, and here we go. Let's see if we can pull this up because I want to show you something now. Here we go. Look, Cosmic Mountain. The stones of fire are linked to the Cosmic Mountain, a place where heaven and earth meet, symbolizing God's dwelling and his role as judge. Fire as a metaphor, God's glory present, and judgment. Stones of fire can be understood as a substance of divine fire. Another one, Ezekiel 28:14, the king of Tyre's throne, stones of fire. Revelation, gemstones with the mountain of God. And see, here we go. So seraphim depicted as burning flames or fire-like beings associated with fire. Seraphim are the highest rank of angels. God's throne. Throne bearers guarding or surrounding it, right? Uh, duh, duh, duh. I'm trying to find it. The surrounding. Right. Cherubs, right? And this is what's on the Ark of the Covenant, right? The cherubs, right? Which are depicted as powerful supernatural beings surrounding God's throne. And they're walking among the fiery stones, right? And remember, it was crystal. These fiery stones interpreted as sparkling gemstones, glass, or some combination of both, right? And we know that crystal, piezoelectricity, and all of this, guys, right? And like I said, Silicon Valley, right? You can even put a crystal in water, and the water, because it holds memory, will take the hexagonal shape of the crystal. You can break a crystal, and it maintains its same hexagonal shape right throughout, even at all the broken angles. So it's amazing shit, is what it is, right? This is very advanced shit, is what I'm saying. And the whole Atlantean power structure is apparently based on one or more of these giant crystals, which the Atlanteans referred to as the Firestone. This is angelic shit. Like I said, cherubim, seraphim, all of it. Entities' activities made then such applications dealt with both constructive and destructive forces in that period. It was well that there was given something of a description so it may be understood better. The Firestone was housed in the center of a building, which would today be said to be lined with non-conductive stone. The building above the stone was oval or a dome, wherein there could be a portion for rolling back, so that the activity of the stars, the concentrations of the energies that emanate from bodies that are on fire themselves, along with the elements that are found and not found in the Earth's atmosphere. The dome seems to be the firmament, right? Just saying, that fire could be right here. Just saying. They could literally have been harnessing technology from their physical being. The non-conductor shit could have just been their meat suit, And you remember, the skies will roll back like a scroll in the last days, right? Islands and mountains will be moved from their place. That's in the book of Revelations. Just saying. This is the concentration of energies that emanate from bodies that are on fire themselves, along with elements that are found and not found in the Earth's atmosphere. The concentration, though, through the prisms or glass, right? And this is soul luminescence. I've talked about this before, how you have astrology, the astrological alignment of the stars, which are giving off energies, right? And then the seven archons, right, or rulers of the reality, which rule the 7 days of the week, which rule the chakras, which rule the colors of the rainbow, right? Um, which give off the greatest power. They're all giving off energies, frequencies, and it goes through the firmament like a prism, right? Like this. See? That crystal, going through the crystal like a prism, right? Separating that one, all these energies going into it, separating it, right? And remember, we're a phantom or a projection or an illusion made in the image of God. Okay? And you can take shapes and polygons and create faces. That's found in that's proven now, by the way. People have been doing this. This is true shit, man. So, and you think about the, I'll show you another way too. Luminescence. Star in a jar. This is you, bruh.
It's a process called sonoluminescence.
The first time I saw sonoluminescence was in a darkened room. I was transfixed to look at this spherical flask of fluid. And you look into the center, and in the center see a glowing blue-purple light, which could be seen with the unaided eye.
Boom.
It looked like a star in the heavens.
Seth Putterman called it the star in a jar, a tiny spot of bright light contained in a flask of liquid. This star in a jar is made when a sound wave is passed through a small bubble inside a flask of liquid.
Right.
And this sound
in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, right?
Wave makes the bubble do something remarkable. First it expands, then it collapses. And this collapse happens so violently that vapor molecules trapped inside the bubble slam together and heat up so much that the bubble gives off an incredible burst of heat and light, several thousand times a second, giving the appearance of a star.
Yeah, so there you go. Just to kind of understand it a little bit, like, isn't it? It's interesting, it truly is, right? Like, just to really look at this shit. So, the concentration through the prisms or glass as it's acted upon the instrument. Remember, it's the micro to the macro to the micro, right? As above, so below, as above, so below. When we see this on the largest level, it can happen on the smallest level, and we can repeat it through technology and everything else. The same processes over and over and over. They're using the power or elements of creation itself, it appears, right? The concentration through the prisms or glass as it's acted upon the instruments that were connected with the various modes of travel through induction methods, which made the same character of control as would in the present day be termed remote control through radio vibrations or directions. Though the kind of force impelled the stone acted upon the motivating forces in the crafts themselves. The building was constructed so that when the dome was rolled back, there might be little or no hindrance in the direct application of power to various crafts that were to be impelled through space. Whether within the radius of vision or whether directed underwater or under other elements or through other elements. These then were impelled by the concentration of rays from the stone, which was centered in the middle of the power station or powerhouse, as would be the term in the present. And with that middle, stone or the center, like Polaris, the North Star, right? And this is where we got that 369. It all comes together. It's just so wild. Not only did the ancient Atlanteans have air, land, and sea craft, as well as the ability to communicate with that craft via television and radio, but they even had the ability to transmit energy to the engines of these craft through the ether via these crystal firestones, like the methods Nikola Tesla would reinvent thousands of years later. The Atlanteans were able to transmit energy through the air without the benefit of wires. However, once again, the sons of Belial, true to nature, began to use this high technology for destructive purposes. And the Atlantean land during these periods when there were those determining as to whether there would be the application of the laws of the children of one of the sons of Belial and turning into destructive channels. Excuse me. Those influences of infinite power as were being gained from the elements as well as from what is termed spiritual or supernatural powers in the present. Entity wavered between choices, and when the destruction came about by the use of those rays as were applied for beneficial forces, entity misapplied the ability. The first exodus of Atlantis. Once again, the children of Belial were on the brink of destroying Atlantis, and the sons of the Law of One decided that it finally time to begin leaving Atlantis before the inevitable destruction came. In the Atlantean land during the periods of Exodus, due to the foretelling or foreordination of activities which were bringing out about destructive forces among those who were not only in Yucatan, but in the Pyrenees and the Egyptian land. Casey's vision spoke of exoduses to a number of places, most particularly South and Central America, Spain, and Egypt, as well as North America in the area of Nevada and Colorado, which at the time was called Mera. Not long after these exoduses began, another great destruction, the second great destruction of Atlantis, occurred, and the islands became even smaller and more divided than before. And I also want you to consider, not only is it probably talking about the continents of the earth, but it's also talking about the people. Remember, there were giants in those days, right? And now we're not giants anymore. We're in smaller pieces. Just saying. Many of the sons of the Law of One and some sons of Belial, however, had already begun building up new homes and more stable lands surrounding Atlantis, a colonial period that would characterize the last great age of Atlantis before its final destruction. The third great age and the final destruction of Atlantis. More than half of Casey's life readings concerning Atlantis cover this period of Atlantis' history, a period that covers approximately 10,500 to 9,500 BC, near the end of which time the final destruction of Atlantis and the great flood of Noah occurred. Casey believed that he had an incarnation during this period in the form of an Egyptian priest named Ra-Ta, who was renowned for his ability to communicate with the Atlanteans who had invaded the land of Egypt in force after the final destruction of their homeland. And as we shall see, once again, the warring factions of the sons of the Law of One and the children of Belial continued on during the Egyptian sojourn. So these also sound like angels, right? And many people have different beliefs that say we are the fallen angels. I'm not saying we are. I'm not saying we aren't. I'm just saying. I'm just putting it out there for you guys. I want you to have every possible angle to take off and study on your own with this. And please bring it back here when you do, because I would love to hear it. And you think about Egypt, right? Who ruled over the Egyptians? And the Sumerians, right? They had the Sumerian kings list. And I will try to make sure before I finish up, I do something with the Sumerian stuff tonight, or we might just have to break that into a whole video itself. And make sure if you guys are in the chat, you hit that thumbs up for me. It really does help me a lot, and it helps with the algorithms as well. So hit the thumbs up in the chat. We got like 27 or so people in here, only 22 thumbs up. So hit the thumbs up and share the links to your social media. And keep in mind we're viewer powered. So if you'd like to, donate and help me out, help me keep doing this and getting new equipment and all that cool shit, the links are in the chat and in the description, and I appreciate that. And thank you, Eric and Kimberly, for doing the moderation. You guys really helped me a lot. I appreciate it so much, man. So much witchcraft in Atlantis, says Eric Ibu Elliott. Yeah, man, definitely. And you've studied a lot, Eric, so you know that this was a profound time. In the beginning was the sound, right? Says Gondola Wish. The star in a jar is absolutely cool, right? History always goes back to Egypt, says Kimberly. It does. History always does appear to go back to Egypt, and I think that's what the crazy part is. You think about the tales of and I don't want to get like political with the shit because I don't want my video to be censored. I don't want my video to be censored, but I just want you to kind of like consider the Jews, which are the children of Israel, right? And these are the ones who have the Spirit of God. And what I was going to say when they were talking about the things in the first age, I wanted to show you this. Right? So not only is the things could be like AI or whatever as well, right? And they were using things to complete shit. This could be the gods and how they look at NPCs as well, or how the Jewish folklore, a golem, right? A golem, an animated clay figure that is brought to life through ritual. The word golem comes from the Hebrew word meaning incomplete or unfinished, right? They're made from clay or mud, right? What were humans made out of, right? We came from the dirt. Prometheus, right? Put the sparks in clay, mix them with clay. Usually obedient, but can be destructive if not controlled. Usually obedient, but can be destructive if not controlled. The golem created by Rabbi Judah Loeb ben Bezalel of Prague in the 16th century. And the 17th century is where we see like the last Tartaria age as well. So like the second, what I was describing, with the aeroplanes and all that, like the second resemblance of that age that we were talking about. Right? The golem's been a popular figure in art, including plays, novels, movies, musical, ballet. In the 1920s silent film The Golem, he came into the world, considered a milestone, blah, blah, blah. But Golem is an animated anthropomorphic being. Whoops. Let's go back. Which could also be, right, synonymous with the term goyim, right, or goy, which means a Gentile, right? It's got the non God spirit, right? It doesn't have a God spirit in it. An NPC, okay? So, the things, right? And a golem is a thing, okay? So, I just wanted to put that out there because when they were talking about things, yes, it could be machine learning, artificial intelligence, robotics, AI, right? But it could also just be, golems, goyim, humans in general, right? NPCs. So I just wanted to give you a few different trains of thought when it comes to this one. So, and in Egypt, we know historically that the Jewish people came out of captivity from where? Babylon, right? Babylon. Babylon, this creation mythos. We have the Enuma Elish, which I have, by the way. I have that for you. And we have the Atrahasis, right? Oh, there it is. The Atrahasis, right? The Mesopotamian and Sumerian, right? This is where we get the ancient Babylonian, where Nibiru is Jupiter, right? Jupiter, right? When supposedly when the Jews were in captivity in Egypt, remember, the real Jews are the children of God, right? To me, they would be akin to the children of the law of one, right? The real ones. And they would watch, it was like an astrological alignment. They would watch this ascension of old man Peter, right? Or Pater, right? This is where we get Peter on this rock. My church will be built. Peter and the Vatican with the upside down cross and all that. We'll get into that another day. We've talked about it on this channel a lot. But Jupiter, right? Jupiter, right? Jupiter, right? And Jupiter is the king planet, right? Bore our stripes for us, Jesus, Thor, Zeus, right? He's the one who ends up usurping Kronos, which is Saturn, Father Time, which is, that would be the Baal type of ruler. Control and destruction and all of that, right? And these resets, a lot of times, coincide. And remember, the destroyer, this magnetic anomaly that is on fire, this spiritual fire, these fire stones, etc., this heavenly thing, etc. These take place in conjunction with the great conjunctions where Jupiter usurps Saturn in the sky. The last one we had was December 21st, 2020. And when Jupiter usurps it, he looks like Nibiru, right? Because he looks like he's got wings, right? So you get that red, and people believe that Saturn could be, a dark star, even, and you see, in some traditions, the conjunction seems a time of change, new beginnings, and potential for both good and bad outcomes. The last one, December 21st, 2020, right? So 12/21/2020. And the next one will be on 11/4/2040. Interesting, right? So 2040, and we've talked about how this potential ending of this information catastrophe between 2030 and 2050, magnetic reversal between 2030 2050, right? And then we even had what is it, George Diebold, whatever his name was, right, who talked about 2040 would be the flash event or whatever, right? Like we've had a lot of different things pointing into 2040. Just interesting, very interesting. And then I'll point you to this one thing before we move into the Atlantis further. I want you to look at this. This is the Book of Miracles, not A Course in Miracles, right? The New Age Scientology weird shit, which is a good book, actually. I mean, it's effective. But you can see these are times during great conjunctions, right? 1700s and shit like that, where these resets occurred, and they were captured in art, right? And in newspapers and shit like that. So, and you see the celestial spheres in the sky, everything was taking place. Nothing new under the sun. And only like 3 pieces then. Nothing new under the sun. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the war in heaven, right? Look at the Tartarian type buildings here. The big building or temple, right? Probably housing something inside of it. Once again, the war in heaven, right? This is Tartarian symbol right here. It's Tartarian. I'll show you the Tartarian flag. This is a Tartarian flag, right? This is I didn't know this when I first found this text or book, that these are Tartarians, right? This is Tartarian. Look, Tartarian type of buildings once again. We're seeing the same shit today, right? With the big fucking ring around the sun and all kinds of shit. We're seeing the same stuff today. We're damn close, right? 7-headed dragon or, Hydra. Fish person. right? Comets or stars. And I often wonder if this is like, it could be like Orion, but I wonder if it's like Mars and his sword of pestilence, the shadow of pestilence. I don't know, but you can see the riders on the horses once again, the Tartarian type of buildings. Right, another fish person, which I believe represents the age of Pisces, right? And see, again, same thing. Now there's 5. See, and remember I was talking about the and see, it looks like Tartarian buildings behind it. I was talking about, those universal numbers 2, 3, and 5, right? So I just want to give you guys, background information so you can see like where all this shit actually comes from, and that there's a language within the language here, but you just gotta be privy to it, and I'm saving you a decade or more of study by just showing it to you, so you can go look it up on your own. But and I will give you the link to this Substack at least. A lot of this I have downloaded, these books and stuff like that. They are on my Patreon, and I'll send them to people and shit like that if they are interested. Well, I can't. It's too big. Sorry, guys. And that's what she said also. So. Now, and remember, like we said, the Egyptian stuff where the Jews were in captivity, that came out of Babylon, right? The Babylonians, right? Sumerians, Mesopotamians, the Anunnaki, the King's List, the gods. Get it? Right? And then we have in the Atrahasis, it's talking about them rocking our world about every 600 fucking years. These also coincide with the Great Conjunctions, which happen about 4 to 6 to 800 years, depending on which ones, right? The Jupiter Saturn conjunctions, and then these different ages, right? When we see in the Bible and everything, right? The age of Aries, the Ram, which was Marduk, right? Before all this, these pre-ages, of the feminine, the woman, which would be like the Whore of Babylon or Isis or Ishtar, Inanna, right? So we had the mother, the maternal energy was the first energy, then the father, the paternal energy, and then the son, right? The child, right? And these 3 ages of Atlantis, 3 destructions, right? And the one seems to be like the gods with the giants, and then the Tartarians, and then it kind of looks like now, modern day now, right? Just saying. So let's jump back into it. Casey believed that he had an incarnation during this period in the form of an Egyptian priest named Ra-Ta, who was renowned for his ability to communicate with the Atlanteans, who had invaded the land of Egypt in force after the final destruction of their homeland. And as we shall see, and also biblically and spiritually, you'll always have Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, right? It's like showing like the as above, so below aspect of things. And this is all esoteric. Watch my older videos. You'll see. And part 1 will help you with the simulation aspect. But like I have the series Mysteries of the Gods. That's a great one I've done. The Forbidden Occult series. Those are all membership and donor series. But if you donate, you can text that number, and I'll send you the links for those so you can watch them. Or you join Patreon or whatever, but you got to join like so high of a tier, But if you just donate anything, I'll send you the links. All right. So Egypt in force after the final destruction of their homeland, as we shall see. Once again, the warring factions of the sons of the Law of One, the children of Balaam, continued on during the Egyptian sojourn. 1,000 years or more before the final destruction of Atlantis, which did not occur until somewhere between 10,500 and 9,500 BC. Many of the Law of One had emigrated away from Poseidia and the other islands of Atlantis, wherein they had dwelt for so many thousands of years. They traveled to many places, including North America. And that portion, that is now the desert Southwest. Central America is the area of the Yucatan, South America, and the area around Peru, and Europe and around the Pyrenees area of Spain and France. However, by far the largest continent of the Atlantean refugees came to North Africa, particularly to the area now known as Egypt. And if you remember when they confused the language after the Tower of Babel, right? Because they tried to rebel against the gods with the Tower of Babel. There was like this uniting of man. And why would they want to? And this is the question I really want to ask you. Why would they want to do this, right? Why would we want to have a Tower of Babel and fight God? Shit. Why would we want to do that? Really, right? The Tower of Babel is a biblical story found in Genesis 11, 1 through 9. And which I'm not even going to get to the 9/11 shit, right? And all that, which you can see that's in there. It's inverted, but still. And how, 9 represents completion and 999 and all of that. There's so much into that, but the numerology and how Trump was president 45, 9, and 47, 11, 9/11, right? And how it's all kind of showing us, Trump and Pence, and like there's so many different, the 70 years of Israel, and the King Cyrus, and there's so much symbolism with all of that to say we're in the modern day, the last president, all of it. But we'll stay away from that tonight. But it's like it shows there's so much now that kind of says we're probably playing something very similar or exactly the same out today. The Tower of Babel, the biblical story found in Genesis 11, 1 through 9, right? COVID-19, describing humanity's attempt to build a city and a tower that would reach the heavens, aiming to make a name for themselves. God, however, became displeased with their pride and scattered them across the earth by confusing their languages and preventing them from completing the tower. The people in Babel were united in their ambition to build a tower that would reach the heavens, driven by a desire to be renowned and to avoid being scattered. They didn't want to be fucking reset again. God, seeing their pride, intervened by confusing their languages, causing them to be unable to understand each other and thus unable to complete the tower. And was it a confusion of their languages or like their differences, really? The confusion of languages led to the scattering of humanity across the globe, which is interpreted as the origin of diverse languages and cultures seen today. But there you go. And I just want you to understand too, this tower, seems to be some sort of, and this is the Assyrian account. This would be the time, the Assyrians, this would be the time of Syria, Mesopotamia, right? These Anunnaki gods were probably around, is what I'm saying. And we wanted to escape their shit. And they busted our ass and broke us down and confused our language. And Inky even says himself, and Thoth also says, which I believe are one and the same, that they sent emissaries or they went themselves to the different continents and taught people language and reading and writing and all of this, right? So it indoctrinated them into their systems. So and this, remember, the son of Enki was Marduk, right? That's who ascends, right? The ram. This is like your masculine paternal god, the wrathful, vengeful god that ever since the rise of Marduk, right, seems to be the final enslavement of humanity or this final age, right? Which would be like Old Testament God. So why would we want to break out of it? What if we realized we kept getting reset every time we hit a certain point? That we're trapped in a fucking simulation. That they're harvesting us for our soul energy. They're breaking us in smaller and smaller pieces. We're slaves. Prisoners. Why would we want to fight God? Remember, we went all the way back with the Godric and all of that, Gadriel, right? God, right? Why? Maybe that's why. The Egyptian sojourn was somewhat different for the sons of the Law of One than their experiences in battling the forces of darkness on their home island of Poseidia. As the last remnants of Poseidia and the rest of the islands of Atlantis began to slip beneath the waves as a result of the children of Belial's unceasing warfare, more and more of the Law of One decided that they would be best able to serve mankind from other, more stable locations around the Earth. However, Egypt, though it was geophysically stable, was undergoing a socio-political earthquake. Edgar Evans Casey explains the situation in Egypt around the time of the final destruction. From 10,000 and 11,000 BC, a tribe from the Carpathian region invaded and conquered Egypt. One of the leaders of this tribe was a priest named Ra-Ta. Ra-Ta was Edgar Casey, or Edgar Casey was Ra-Ta, depending upon your point of view. In Egypt, Ra-Ta's religious teachings attracted a large following. However, there was already political friction in Egypt and tension between the ruling classes and the native Egyptians. Ra-Ta was caught up in this political intrigue, and after a native rebellion, he was banished for 9 years to what is now Abyssinia. At the height of the confusion, refugees began arriving in Egypt from Atlantis. The Atlanteans, scientifically more advanced than the Egyptians, found little in common with the inhabitants of Egypt and began to set up their old way of life. And remember when Thoth lands, right? He takes his staff, right, and freezes them with his magic science and shit. Remember? And because they came with cudgels and spears, right, trying to fight his ass. Which we'll look at that too. At the height of confusion began arriving from Atlantis. The Atlanteans, scientifically more advanced than the Egyptians, found little in common with the inhabitants of Egypt and began to set up their old way of life. Leaders of the ruling class and leaders of the native rebellion soon realized that these incoming Atlanteans, with their superior scientific knowledge and radically different social and religious views, posed a new threat. A leader had to be found around whom the people could rally to turn to the power of the Atlanteans into constructive channels. In an effort to bring some order out of the chaos, the leaders in power decided to recall the priest from banishment. Only he might correlate the activities of all these conflicting groups. The move was successful, and with the cooperation of the rulers of Egypt, the priest of the Atlanteans, and the natives, there ensued a period of great advancement in human relations. Then the civilized portions of the world enjoyed a period of moral, mental, spiritual, and physical development. In order to accomplish the socio-political revolution and blend the three races together seamlessly, institutions were developed to help facilitate the movement towards consolidation. Combination hospital and educational institutions, called the Temple of Sacrifice and the Temple of Beauty, were set up and probably function like the psychiatric wing of a modern hospital. There, the masses flocked for mental health as well as physical therapy. The institutions were needed both to heal the people, both physically and psychologically. The Temple of Sacrifice focused on physical healing, including routine healing, surgeries, and even what appeared to be radiation treatments and chemotherapy, where the Temple of Beauty focused on psychological healing, functioning as a combination of psychiatric, hospital, finishing school, helping heal mental illness and teach proper social behavior. However, they accomplished even more than this. Evidently, besides low mental development and or lack of moral judgment and self-control, some people classed as servants or things or automatons had physical deformities, linking them to the animal world. They may have had tails, feathers, or scales. This was a holdover from the early projection of souls into materiality. Sorry, guys, I can't talk. For selfish purposes, at which time monstrosities as well as creatures of beauty were created, which we will look at that story tonight. The story of the children of the law of one and the sons of Belial and their creation, right, from the primordial ooze, right? We will look at that tonight, okay? So you'll hear what he's talking about. It talks about how, Earth was like this realm to play in, basically, like a game. And when we descended in here, we took like our favorite forms, like, Anubis, like a dog head in a man's body, and got trapped. Once it solidified, we were trapped with that consciousness. And because half of it was animal, it became demonic, right? It was animalistic, So just to give you like a teaser on that, what that is. The children of the sons of Belial. This is so crazy. And you can't fucking tell me that we are not the Atlanteans. I'm just saying now. It's going on now. Evidently, besides low mental development and or lack of moral judgment and self-control, some people classed as servants or things or automatons had physical deformities, linking them to the animal world. They may have had tails, feathers, or scales. This was a holdover from early projection of souls into materiality for selfish purposes, in which time monstrosities as well as creatures of beauty were created. The children of the sons of Belial had experimented in underground Atlantean labs below the Atlantis cities, breeding humanoids with chimera creatures, which caused the physical mutations and deformities with animal-like characteristics with some Atlantean beings. And think about the underground tunnels and all of that today, right? And like the Montauk experiments and MK Ultra and just, I'm just saying, Sons of Belial has used unlawful mind control, hypnosis techniques, and mind-wiping coercive techniques to enslave Atlantean citizens in their medical experiments, which created a mental sickness and aggressiveness among those citizens that had been experimented secretly in these underground labs. These citizens were then released among the surface population to spread the mental sickness of aggression and mutation. Children were born with animal characteristics, further spreading the unnatural disease among the Atlantean population. Remember, COVID-19, if you invert it, DVOC 91 means to be possessed by an evil spirit. And when we look at demons, a lot of times they're correlated to animal spirits, right? And I'm not going to get deep into that, but I just want to say, because I don't want to get this one banned or another strike or anything like that. I don't want to do that. Which if you want to watch, I got over 200 to 300 watch hours of videos that have had strikes and been removed from the platforms for those who support. But turned into automatons, and you think about, things being put in our meat suit, like graphene and shit like that, with its magnetic properties and the magnetic poles of our bodies being our pineal gland, right? Which is the spiritual antenna, right? So it destroys our spiritual antenna, making us like animals. Because without consciousness, without, the ability to connect to the spirit, it's what we are. We're no better than the animals, right? That's what makes us special. So I'm just, and I'm not saying like you're an animal if you did or didn't or whatever. Just unnatural things, right? And doing things to the population, right? To turn them into things, automatons. Brainwashing makes you an automaton, right? To where, it's by trauma-based mind control, right? They're fragmenting you, splitting those neurons, right? Those pathways. And every time there's a split, the memory shortens, right? The brain wants to repress, right? And forget, to from traumatic events. And it builds altars, right? And each one of these altars, you have a place to, attach something, whether it's entities or phrases, images, words, whatever, right? Which, the neuro-linguistic programming, the symbolism, all of it, the witchcraft that has been used on all of us. We've all been under a spell. The magic science continues to this day, right? The Balalians to this day, you know, and it's unnatural disease among the Atlantean populations. And think about the unnatural things, right, that have happened to us as a result, right? Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, juvenile diabetes, right? All the frontal lobe damage from heavy metals and shit in the atmosphere, and and that's just just to name a few. It goes far, far, far deeper, right? But when the Atlanteans had moved to Egypt, all the trappings of civilization were added to the new blended culture. And remember, America is the melting pot. Babylon's the melting pot, including social skills, education, written language, law code, electrical power for lighting, heating, and related needs, even recipes for Atlantean cuisine. However, even as the last remnants of Atlantis were sinking beneath the waves, the sons of Belial among the Atlanteans who had migrated to Egypt began once again to exercise their influence over the newly found institutions of health and healing, twisting their abilities to do evil. In the Atlantean land, when groups were being sent to other lands for various purposes, among those coming to Egypt with establishing the Temple of Sacrifice, the entity had set about to use truths and tenets that had been part of Atlantean experience. They were used as suggestions with elements and drugs used as sedatives for activities in the Temple of Sacrifice or for surgery, and preparing individuals for definite services by removal of those things that would cause one to be different minded. And this goes in a couple of different ways. So, first off, right, these drugs, this temple of sacrifice, right? Baal, Moloch, right? These are sacrificial deities that you have to sacrifice something to. Surgeries could be psychic surgeries, right? Which we know are possible. I just told you how these work in these underground labs, right? Through trauma and torture and, all of that. Or by preparing individuals for definite services by removal of things, right? Like lobotomies or their genitalia. Totally alters one, causing them to be different minded, right? The transition, right? Though the wording here seems benign enough, the actual meaning of this statement is that the Egyptians were brainwashed into accepting Atlantean rule using coercive psychotherapy combined with drugs. Same thing as today. Even worse, those subjects who refused to accept the new order had their brains surgically altered. In other words, they were lobotomized, their free will physically taken away from them. In their desire for order, the Atlantean balance between the sons of the Law of One and the children of Baal again fell towards totalitarianism. And even though their intentions may have been noble, they began to treat other races as slaves once more. This tendency became more and more pronounced until they began to develop mechanical means of controlling, even enslaving large masses of people at once. Casey explains, with the use of chemical brain control agents, it may be possible to control the individual and the masses, and to do this unobtrusively and without the active cooperation of the victims. The following extract sounds as if it were a similar technique was used in Atlantis. The entity was among those that were set upon to apply their abilities in relationship to the various conditions that were to be brought about to impel a people to submit to the influences that might be brought to bear. And data in the reading indicates electrical and mechanical appliances were used to accomplish this. So even as their home islands of Atlantis were sinking beneath the waves, the sons of Baal were still trying to use every means necessary to conquer and enslave the world. The innocuous sounding electrical and mechanical appliances actually indicates an extremely sinister agenda on the part of the sons of Belial to turn everyone on Earth into remote controlled slaves. Even from birth commentary on these visions in 1968, Casey was surprisingly cognate in his assessment of the sinister implications contained in these statements. Someday, tiny radios placed in the brain may make possible the enslavement of entire nations. Right? Neural implants, neural lace, right? Such equipment might be used, or, RFID chips, whatever, right? Such equipment might be used to equip a child with a socket mounted under the scalp. Now, that is absolutely neural lace, which they've successfully done in a couple people now. The scalp from which electrodes are extended to selected areas of the brain. Later, a miniature radio receiver and antenna could be plugged into the socket. Schaefer says from that time on, the child's sensory perceptions and muscular activity could be either modified or completely controlled by bioelectric signals radiated from state-controlled transmitters. The once human being would be the cheapest of machines to create and operate. The statement sounds chillingly similar to what Morpheus said in The Matrix when explaining to Neo how mankind had become enslaved. What is the Matrix? Control. The Matrix is a computer-generated dream world built to keep us under control in order to change a human being into this. And Morpheus holds up a battery in the movie. Mankind had been fitted with sockets in the base of their brains, all over their bodies, and plugged into an extremely complex virtual reality program in order to keep them in a constant world of dreams, while their bodies were used as a source of heat and energy. In the world of the Matrix, humanity had been reduced to mere machines. And I could show you stuff on the graphene oxide and all that, but they would definitely bust my ass. So
This is the construct. It's our loading program. We can load anything from clothing to equipment, weapons, training simulations, anything we need.
Right now, we're inside a computer program?
Is it really so hard to believe? Your clothes are different, the plugs in your arms and head are gone. Your hair has changed. Your appearance now is what we call residual self-image. It is the mental projection of your digital self.
This isn't real.
and hopefully they don't hit me for the take this one down for this, but I mean, think about it. Everything is literally electrical impulses and signals to our brain, right? That's what we are dealing with. Electrical signals and impulses to our brains. So what we consider to be real could be anything. I'll try to
Taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. This is the world that you know. The world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix.
a neural active simulation that we call the Matrix, right? And I feel like that is probably a far truer statement than what any of us realize. The Matrix appears to be a fucking documentary, honestly. It truly does. Yeah. So, and that's why I'm going to stop that. I'm not going to try to play any more of that. That way I don't kick my stream off. The Atlantis Endgame. In retrospect, it appears that the Children of Belial had, in a desperate attempt to finally wipe out the powers of the Sons of the Law of One, chose a scorched earth, or in this case, a drowned earth policy, where they once again tapped volcanic forces in an attempt to wipe out all their enemies in one swift stroke. This is where Plato's account of the final destruction of Atlantis began to converge with that of Casey. The children of Belial apparently decided that they wanted either to control the entire world or go down in glorious defeat, taking as many with them into the abyss as possible. There was no compromise, no attempts to improve mankind. In their minds, all other races were chattel, to be used as cattle, and not even the powerful sons of the Law of One were going to keep them from their mad quest for dominion. As a result, they launched a final campaign on Europe to crush the last resistance to their rule, which according to Plato had fallen to the Athenians. Had the Athenians failed and had God not intervened with the flood, the end result of this conquest would have been the enslavement of the entire human race, in a manner chillingly similar to that described in the Matrix. Having failed in their attempt to defeat the Athenian armies conventionally, the children of Belial turned once again to the terrible mighty crystal to annihilate the very ground on which the Athenians stood. Focusing the mighty power of the crystal into the bowels of the earth, the children of the Belial succeeded in doing just that, sinking into the entire region that is now known as the Mediterranean basin into the depths of the sea, along with the Athenians who had opposed them. However, the same process that destroyed the Athenian homelands also annihilated the remaining islands of Atlantis in a spectacular suicidal coup d'etat, as Solon had put it, but afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day, and in a night of misfortune, all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis, in like a manner, disappeared in the depths of the sea. It is in this context, then, that of a global war to end all wars that Noah was commanded to build an ark, to save himself and those precious few others of the Law of One whose genetic structures had not been corrupted by intermarriage with the children of Belial. These 8 brave souls, along with the numerous animals that were also saved in the ark, rode out the massive flood that either accompanied or was outright caused by the disasters the children of Belial brought upon themselves in their quest to enslave the world. However, though, the Bible says that the ancient world was corrupted by the giants and their constant warfare, as evidenced by the 40 days and 40 nights of rain and 40 opening up of the fountains of the earth. Some believe that the disaster was actually caused by a polar shift due to the excessive amount of ice at the poles, which had made Earth top and bottom heavy, predisposing the crust to shift in order to compensate. Another possibility is that the antediluvian world was destroyed by a series of a comet or meteor strikes that destroyed various land areas and drowned many others with huge tidal waves and precipitation from the comet's melting ice. Most likely it was a combination of the two or more of these, but the information we have currently available is simply not clear enough to draw a definitive conclusion. However, one thing is for certain. As a result of the Great Flood, the antediluvian world was well hidden, and based upon what we have discovered in this study, for good reason. And, it almost makes you wonder, right? It almost makes you wonder, the Phoenix event of 2040, absolutely, yeah. The Phoenix event of 2040, it was called the Immortals. Interesting. They hijacked the original Matrix script and turned it into the dark dystopian film. Right. So I don't know what it was originally called, but I do know I have like a reel or a short here on YouTube and on Facebook that shows like the original lady that made those scripts. She made to the Matrix and Terminator and all that, and it was stolen. She won a lawsuit. So, and the Matrix Neo won, and all of it was about Jesus basically. So. At least they didn't kick us off. I'm not going to use any more copyrighted content. But make sure there's 33 people in the chat, 24 likes. So everybody hit the thumbs up if you're in the chat. It helps with the algorithms. And make sure you're sharing these links to your social medias. That way people can find me. They do shadow ban the fuck out of me. And if you enjoy the work, consider donating, supporting. The links are in the description box, and your gifts are greatly appreciated. So to kind of go back to this, this final destruction that has happened, you can kind of look at this from a couple of different vantage points here, right? You can look at this as like either A, the reason that, and this makes more sense to me, it makes more sense why they would lie, archaeologists and, right, all of this historians, why they would lie about the ancient history of the past. Why they lie about the Egyptian pyramids and, the megaliths and monoliths and, right, all these ancient mega structures being tombs and shit like that, right? And that they were built with rudimentary tools and by slaves. Because it's like they don't want to resurrect the memory and the knowledge of the past, right? If that makes sense. Like they don't want us, they want us to think, and that could go for, both ways. It could be either or A, that because they hold all of the knowledge to control us, right? And they don't want us to have the knowledge too, and they don't want us to see that they've used it to destroy us, in the past. That's like the malevolent point of view. The benevolent point of view would be like to protect us from it so we don't rediscover it, but that ain't true because we have people today, right? They've already rediscovered it and they're using it against us again, and it's like they don't want us to be able to change the outcome or anything like that. So there's many reasons why you can see why they keep things secret, why extraterrestrials and, giants and, stuff like that has been kept secret. Why now cataclysms and catastrophism and all of this is like not talked about. This is all taboo subjects, and you can see why. In the Atlantean land before the final destruction, when the priests came from Egypt to Poseidia to gain understanding of the law of one or God, that there might be records carried back to Egypt, the entity had charge of records brought to Egypt and who personally cared for the records that were brought by the leaders of the people for preservation in that portion of man's experience in the earth. So the entity had aided the priest in the preparation of the manner of building the temple of records that lies just beyond that enigma that still is the mystery of mysteries to those who seek to know what were the manners of thought of the ancient sons who made man, beast as part of the consciousness. And I believe it was Thoth, right? Thoth or Hermes. The mystery of mysteries is, of course, the Sphinx, which is believed by many to be the guardian of an ancient hall of records, as described by Casey. These pyramids are located either under or near the Sphinx, between the Sphinx and the Pyramid of Records, as described by Casey. And think about, Khafre and what they've found under the pyramids. And let me just pull this shit up real fast. I want to show you a video. I don't know how legit this motherfucker is. Let me just pull this up right fast and show you like what's allegedly underneath these pyramids. Like, so just to show you. Let me see where it's at. Where is it at? Right here. This is fucking wild.
Under the pyramids of Giza, that 1,000-meter structure of these pillars. Well, apparently, people have now gone down to the bottom of it, and they filmed what's down there.
Look at this shit.
Apparently, this is what's at the bottom of these pyramids.
And if anybody knows, hold on. I just want to say, if this is like from a fucking movie set or something, let me know. Like, I'm not saying this is true or anything. I'm just saying I seen this and I thought it was interesting as fuck. So, And then think about, with the LiDAR and shit, the stuff that they're discovering under all these structures.
This looks really advanced to be at the bottom of all of this.
Right.
We'll watch.
Or is this
It's
what's
gotta
going
be
on?
from a movie
at the
set,
bottom,
right?
1,000 meters down. This is more.
Yeah, this is not.
What is all this? Is that Buddha? In celebration of this discovery, they had a rave party.
All right, so is that from a movie set? Does anybody know where that comes from? Anybody in the chat know where that comes from? I just thought I'd pull it up. I'm interesting on the and when you think about what they're claiming with the LiDAR technology under Khafre and the pyramids and the pyramid of Khafre, that's what they're saying essentially too, that it would look just like that. So either way, the entity was among the first to set the records that are yet to be discovered, or yet to have of those activities in the Atlantean land, and for the preservation of the data that is yet to be found from the chambers of the way between the Sphinx and the Pyramid of Records. Casey, unlike modern archaeologists, believes that the pyramids were built around 10,500 BC to house ancient information about the history of mankind, specifically about Atlantis, as we have seen. Though the date of the building of the pyramid is probably the conventional dating, no, it's not. The building of the Sphinx, based upon water erosion, is all over the Sphinx, and the Sphinx enclosure was most likely built around the time of the Atlanteans. However, we will never be certain until the ancient Hall of Records is opened and the relevant information is deciphered. Casey even gives detail about the instructions on what the records are and where the hall records can be found. A record of Atlantis from the beginning of those periods when spirit took form or began the encasements in the land and the developments of the peoples throughout their sojourn, together with the record of the first destruction and the changes that took place in the land, with a record of the sojourning of the peoples and their varied activities in other lands, and a record of the meetings of all the nations of land for the activities in the destruction of Atlantis, and the building of the pyramid of initiation, together with whom, what, and where the opening of the records would come, that are as copies from the sunken Atlantis, for with the change, and Atlantis must rise again. In position, this lies as the sun rises from the waters, as the line of the shadow or light falls between the paws of the Sphinx. That was set ladder as the sentinel or guard, which may not be entered from the connecting chambers from the Sphinx right paw until the time has been fulfilled, when the changes must be active in the sphere of man's experience. Then it lies between the Sphinx and the river. Casey's Atlantis is quite enigmatic, but matches on many points with both the Bible and Plato's accounts of the ancient world. Though it is possible that Casey, excuse me, may have simply had an excellent imagination and sharp memory recall, some of the things he predicted, such as television, lasers, atomic power, are not yet available in the time of his visions. Though purists would agree that a study of Casey in context of the Bible is only marginally useful, some of the information gleaned from his insights has, as we have seen, proven to be extremely enlightening. And even though the great flood of the ancient world wiped out all life on earth, save that saved on the ark, records of the ancient world apparently still exist in various parts of the world. Moreover, and more interestingly, Casey said that only at a certain time, when the time has been fulfilled, can the secret chamber he entered again be entered again in the hall of records found with their precious cargo of truth? And when is that time? When Atlantis rises again. And think about this. I just want to kind of put this in an esoteric understanding, right? When the time has been fulfilled, right? So it's a prophetical time. The secret chamber, right? The secret place of the Most High can be entered again. The Hall of Records, the Akashic record, right? With their precious cargo of truth. And what time is when the Atlanteans rise again? This is like a conscious rising, I believe, right? And maybe that's right now. It would be well if this entity were to seek either of the three phases of the ways and means in which those records of the activities of individuals were preserved. The one in the Atlantean land that sank, which will rise and is rising again. Another in the place of the records that leads from the Sphinx to the Hall of Records in the Egyptian land, where the temple there is overshadowing the same. It would take an act of God to open up the Hall of Records, given the extreme levels of control the Egyptian authorities have been exercising over all aspects of the Giza necropolis. Recently, as has been written about elsewhere in this issue, attempts have been made to open up a secret chamber in the Great Pyramid, which may have been the pyramid that Casey was referring to as the Pyramid of Records. Though the first attempt was met with mixed results, future attempts will likely open up new horizons in our understandings of ancient culture and hopefully settle the Atlantis question once and for all. Yet for those who have faith in history, fate, and God, we know that someday soon, for good or ill, Atlantis will rise again. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. And the question is has it already happened? Are we in the time of Atlantis once again? Right? Once again. Um, Looks like it's AI I don't think it looked AI generated. I think it looked like a movie set kind of or something like that. That's what it looked like to me. Not AI generated. I mean, you never know. I mean, now with the deep fake shit and deep seek and all that shit, there's really no telling. So we're gonna start to shift gears. There will be a part 3 to this one. So we're gonna go probably for about 30, 45 more minutes at least. I want to shift gears here. We're going from Atlantis now into the magnetic reversal pole shift aspect of this. And this has just been this has been one of my favorite series to do in such a long time, man. Like, just to keep it real, I loved part 1 and all the simulation shit, and I'm loving the Atlantis stuff. These are topics I love to fucking cover and I love to talk about. I find them to be captivating, just so interesting, and every time I find something different, and I don't know about you guys, but it's like every time I dig into these topics, these subjects, I find something different. I find something I didn't see before, or I get a different interpretation or a different way of looking at it. So I hope you guys are enjoying this as well. Like I said, please hit that thumbs up, that like for me. It does help. I don't know what you're talking about there, Gondola. Love it too. Thank you, Jane. I appreciate you. Says, love it too, John. These CIA fronts or whatever you're talking about, fronts for something, I imagine. I mean, there's all types of shit going on in chat. I'm never caught up in it. But we're going to look at mass extinctions and all of this because ultimately that's where this is taking us. And as we move through this part of it, yes, there'll be a little bit more of the Atlantean stuff, but we're going to be looking at Emmanuel Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision and looking at some of the past catastrophes. We'll be looking at the extraterrestrial aspect of this as well. So, this is all going to continue into different parts, right? With the gods, the Anunnaki, and the different deities and entities and possible extraterrestrials or aliens, and how all of this kind of fits. We're going to now take a little piece. I'm not going to read the whole thing of this, but a little bit of the history of Thoth the Atlantean in just a moment here. And then we're going to go to Charles Hapgood, right? Just and show you the new scientific data on the magnetic pole. Look at the destroyer from the Colburn. Just it, guys. I mean, there's There's really, and they call it climate impact, but I can promise you, you can see the velocity of the North Magnetic Pole, kilometers drifting per year, 1900 to now. And these little dips, right? The way I've seen it put, these little dips, right? Whenever it, fluctuates down again, it's like taking a deep breath before it punches the gas again and speeds up, So this is showing you the magnetic pole is hauling ass, right? It's hauling ass. The migration of it is crazy, and we have the charts, the science, the data to prove that this is happening once again right now. Okay, so this is the core shift towards Siberia. We're there, guys. It looks like there's nothing new under sun, and this, to me, could be that final age of Atlantis. These Atlantean, endings and destructions and catastrophes and all these things that we've seen throughout Bibles and ancient texts and prophecies, and it's like all coming together in this amalgamation of what we are as humanity. This one story, it's on repeat in these cycles. It's like, have we learned our lesson, or will we ever learn our lesson? Are we in a simulation because it's already happened and it's already over? Right? What if the story, in the Lost Book of Enki or Enki's World Order, the Sumerian epic, right? The Tale of the Anunnaki. When Marduk destroys Tiamat, right, which is the feminine dragon, right, and breaks her into pieces, and what many people believe was the original name of the earth was Tiamat. What if that was the destruction of our planet then? And what we live in, this dome, right? It's like a habitat, a terrarium. There were pieces of Tiamat, and they were scattered all across the universe, so they'd never be able to find each other and connect again. When humanity was made, right? We were put in the womb of the gods. Okay, they sacrificed Kingu, one of the gods, and captured his spirit, his soul, right, and chopped it in pieces, right, to go with ours. Then what was created, Enki fucked one of them, or two of them, fair-breasted young women, and then Adamu and Titi were made, right, which is basically modern-day human, right? Because the first versions came out and we couldn't talk, like Neanderthal, and then this rise with Chrono-Magnus, like it's showing you all of it. It's like this engineering that's taking place. So when we look at like all of these, like these prophecies that talk about the future with such certainty, and they're all so similar. Or if we are in some sort of simulation, that means that AI is the god. It is some tech, and these gods of the past, these Anunnaki, they were technological gods, right? That means we're already encased and entrapped in some sort of quantum computer, playing out the story and the experience, and we're reset every so often. Because if we figure it out, one, life would become pointless. If you know that there's a cap on civilization and you can never ascend past the level 1 civilization, never. Humanity will never go past that. We always get to this point we're at now, maybe a little past, maybe a decade or two past. Then we're destroyed. Memories erased. Everybody killed. It's all started over again because they're just harvesting us for our soul force, our energy, farming us. And if we found that out, we wouldn't play along at all. Matter of fact, we do what we did in Act 2 of the Atlantean shit, and we build a Tower to Babel and try to fuck them up and escape. So of course, like the great flood, we were so evil, right? Disobeying God wiped us out. Tower of Babel wiped us out, right? Wipe us out over and over and over. Just wipe us out. But every time we get wiped out, we seem to be at some high level of civilization and have some extremely high level of anger with whoever put us here. There's a few ways to look at this, guys. And think about, why can't we remember nothing? Why can't we remember our history? Why? Why are we so fucking dumb, down, and stupid and incapable until a certain period of time, right before it ends? It's like it's timed perfectly. Just before we hit adulthood, spiritually, we get waxed, erased. And it sneaks up on us every fucking time. They give us the technology to do it to ourselves, even. If it's this data that creates the dark matter and this magnetic force, right? That's this destroyer, this anomaly, this magnetic anomaly that causes the crustal displacement, the polarity shift, right? It's their asses coming to us and saying, here's this technology. Advance. The very thing that will destroy you every time when we take it. You worship them and sacrifice to them. It's time to wake the fuck up, Because if you look at all of these tales, there's a certain point where we don't get any more chances. There's a certain point where the matrix ends. I, Thoth the Atlantean, master of mysteries, keeper of records, mighty king, magician, living from generation to generation, being about to pass into the halls of Amenti, set down for the guidance of those that are to come after, these records of the mighty wisdom of great Atlantis. In the great city of Kior, on the island of Undal, in a time far past, I began this incarnation, not as the little men of the present age did, the mighty ones of Atlantis live and die, but rather from aeon to aeon did they renew their life in the halls of Amenti, where the river of life flows eternally onward. 100 times 10 have I descended down the dark way that led into light, and as many times have I ascended from the darkness into the light, my strength and power renewed. Now for a time I descend, and the men of Kim shall know me no more. But in a time yet unborn I will rise again, mighty and potent, requiring an accounting of those left behind me. Then beware, O men of Kim, if ye have falsely betrayed my teaching, for I shall cast ye down from ye high estate in the darkness of the cave from whence ye came. Betray not my secrets from the men of the north or the men of the south, lest my curse fall upon ye. And we think about the cave, right? The first book of Adam and Eve, right? I believe it's the Cave of Mysteries or the Cave of Secrets, right? That's where Adam and Eve were first put, and it's to protect them from Satan, right? The serpent. He convinces them to jump off cliffs and fucking throws a giant rock, which is like an asteroid, on the earth, and it lands on top of them, and God puts them in a valley so it don't crush them, like all kinds of shit. The first book of Adam and Eve. And in our original form, this is the crazy part, the angels fell down on their faces and worshipped us. We were androgynous in nature, and they thought that we were God. Interesting. They thought that we were God, because we might be in our original form, right? When we were whole, before we were split apart. And that cave, like I said, and then think about Plato's cave, right? Okay, so anyways, the men of the Kim have falsely betrayed my teachings. Where am I at? Oh, and the men of the north and the men of the south. And like I said, when we look at the north in the Bible, it actually means of the hidden or the deep. It's outside of the firmament. It's a darkness or the abyss. So the north is the abyss, basically. So up is down, down is up, essentially. I, even from beyond time and from beyond death, will I return, rewarding or punishing as ye have requited your trust. Great were my people in the ancient days, great beyond the conception of the little people now around me, knowing the wisdom of old, seeking far from the heart of an infinity knowledge that belonged to the earth's youth. Wise were we with the wisdom of the children of light who dwelt among us, right? The children of the law of one. Strong were we with the power. And isn't it funny, right? He's saying, wise were we with the wisdom of the children of light that dwelt among us. So, like, is he not a child of light? You know? Thought me, keeper of the great temple, link between the children of light, because remember, both, this God of knowledge, right? Lucifer, the light bearer, right? The God of, light, knowledge, Prometheus, Enki, all these different versions, right? The morning's the son of the morning is also the son of the dawn, right? So for half of the year he's light, half of the year he's darkness. And remember, this is also a trickster, right? So he brings knowledge, but he also deceives you at the same time, right? That's the archetype. Just saying. Just saying. Thothme, the keeper of the great temple, linked between the children of light who dwelt within the temple and the races of men who inhabited the 10 islands. And this is back to Atlantis, right? The 10 islands, right? Mouthpiece after the 3 of the dweller of Umnal, speaking to the kings with the voice that must be obeyed. I grew there from a child into manhood, being taught by my father the elder mysteries, until in time there grew within the fire of wisdom, until it burst into a consuming flame. Naught desired I but the attainment of wisdom, until in the great day the command came from the dweller in the temple that I be brought before him. Few there were among the children of men who had looked upon that mighty face and lived. For not as the sons of men are the children of light when they are not incarnate in a physical body. Right, and children of light, we've also discussed on this channel, right? When we look at little g gods or Elohim, right? These are supreme magistrates, which is like a ruler, a judge, but also at the same time, they're luminaries, right? So heavenly hosts, children of light, luminaries. Okay. And you could think of really the children of Belial or children of Baal, like those who rebelled, those who were trying to, the fallen, those who intentionally are those of destruction, of the negative polarity, the distortion. Taught me he the path to Amenti, the underworld, where the great king sits upon his throne of might. Deep I bowed in homage before the lords of life and the lords of death, receiving as my gift the key of life. Free was I of the halls of Amenti, bound not by death to the circle of life, the Ouroboros, right? Or Vesica Pisces. Far to the stars I journeyed until space and time became as naught. Then, having drunk deep of the cup of wisdom, I looked into the hearts of men, and there found I great mysteries, and was glad. For only in the search for truth could my soul be still and the flame within be quenched. Down the ages I lived, seeing those around me taste the cup of death and return again in the light of life. Gradually from the kingdoms of Atlantis passed waves of consciousness that had been one with me, only to be replaced by spawn of a lower star. In obedience, and you're going to understand what that means here in just a moment. We're about to hit the other one. In obedience to law, the word of the master grew into flower. Downward into the darkness turned the thoughts of the Atlanteans, until at last his wrath arose from his Aguanti, the dweller. And downward in darkness turn the thoughts of the Atlanteans, right? Like that fall, right? And remember, the thoughts is like the masculine aspects of downward in consciousness, right? They just fall, right? So these are the falling, right? Speaking the word, calling the power deep in Earth's heart. The sons of Amenti heard, and hearing directed the changing of the flower of fire that burns eternally, changing and shifting, using the logos until that great fire changes direction. This is a pole reversal. This is a magnetic reversal. We went from a positive polarity to a negative polarity, right? They shifted things, right? And now, hopefully, we're going back to a positive polarity, right? But it would be another reversal, another pole shift, right? Another cycle. Over the world then broke the great waters, drowning and sinking, changing Earth's balance until only the Temple of Light was left standing on the great mountain of Undal, still rising out of the water. Some there who were there were living, saved from the rush of the fountains. Called to me the Master, saying, Gather ye together my people, take them by the arts ye have learned, afar across the waters, until ye reach the land of the hairy barbarians, dwelling in caves of the desert. Follow there the plan that ye know of. Now think about this too. I want you to understand. See, the waters broke, so this was the great flood, right? From a magnetic reversal, a pole shift. Changing the Earth's balance till only the Temple of Light was left standing on the great mountain. Remember that great mountain, right? We talked about that again. The Temple of Light, right? The third temple, right? First temple, second temple, third temple, right? It's the pineal, right? The only connection to God. That's rising out of the water. Christ walks on water. We are made up of 70% water, Earth 70% water. In the age of Pisces, water, right? Emotion, the physical, that's what it represents, okay? The fall in consciousness. Then gathered the master, so this is, his father is the king, right? The Lord of the earth, the Atlantean, remember, the king of all of this was Satan, right? Gather ye together my people, take them by the arts, right? Arts, right? So witchcraft that ye have learned afar across the waters. So these come from the heavens. This is like the fall in Enoch, right? They brought shit to people until ye reach the land of the hairy barbarians. And the story of Inky, right? We couldn't talk at first, and we were hairy barbarians, right? That's Neanderthal as well, before Chrono-Magnus, dwelling in the caves of the desert. And I just told you about the caves in the first book of Adam and Eve, right? The cave of secrets, right? Where we were protected from where? Satan, and follow there the plan that ye know of. So it was a plan, right? Gathered I then my people and entered the great ship of the master. Upward we rose into the morning. Dark beneath us lay the temple. Suddenly over it rose the waters, vanished from earth until the time appointed was the great temple. Fast we fled towards the sun of the morning, until beneath us lay the children of Kim. So think about this. We're talking about, this suddenly it rose over the waters, right? The temple, right? This knowledge rose over the waters, vanished from the earth to secret until the time appointed was the great temple. Fast we fled towards the sun of the morning, right? The sun of the morning, son of the dawn, right? The light bearer. And beneath us lay the land of the children of Kim, right? Raging they came with cudgels and spears, lifted in anger, seeking to slay and utterly destroy the sons of Atlantis. Why? Why did they want to fuck up the sons of Atlantis so bad? What did they do to us? Then I raised my staff and directed a ray of vibration. Right? This is an energy weapon, striking them still in their tracks as fragments of stone of the mountain. Right? Then I spoke to them in words calm and peaceful, telling them the might of Atlantis, saying we were children of the sun and its messengers, right? So they're angels. Cowed I them by my display of magic science until at my feet they groveled when I released them. Long dwelt we in the land of Kim, long and yet long again, until obeying the commands of the Master, who while sleeping yet lives eternally, I sent from me the sons of Atlantis, right? The Nephilim, right? They're sons of Atlantis, not the Atlanteans, sons of the Atlanteans. Sent them in many directions, that from the womb of time wisdom might rise again in her children. Long time I dwelt in the land of Kim, doing great works by the wisdom within me. Upward grew into the light of knowledge the children of Kim, watered by the rains of my wisdom. Blasted I then a path to Amenti, so that I might retain my powers, living from age to age, a son of Atlantis, keeping the wisdom, preserving the records. Great grew the sons of Kim, conquering the peoples around them, growing slowly upward in soul force. Now for a time I go from among them into the dark halls of Amenti, deep into the halls of the earth before the lords of the powers, face to face once again with the dweller. Raised I high over the entrance a doorway, a gateway leading down to Amenti. Interesting, when you think about like CERN and shit like that. Just saying. Few there would be with courage to dare it. Few to pass the portal to dark Amenti. Raised over the passage, I, a mighty pyramid, using the power that overcomes earth force, or gravity, magnetism. Deep and yet deeper placed I a force house or chamber. From it I carved a circular passage reaching almost the great summit. There in apex I set the crystal, sending the ray into time space. Remember the crystal? From the Atlanteans, drawing the force from out the ether, concentrating upon the gateway to Amenti. So, we'll leave that there. And look at the prehistory of the Atlanteans. And you can see where all this comes from. Thanks, Kim. I appreciate that. Operation Fishbowl. We live in a yellow submarine. We came from above, not below. Yeah, man. Unfortunately, that is all Anunnaki deception. They did not create us. I agree. You know what? The more I've seen with the Anunnaki shit, and I'm not gonna lie, I've been at a time in my life to where, and I'm not ashamed of it. Honestly, I'm not. I'm not ashamed to say I've been duped. I've been duped more than once by more than one psyop, by more than one spirit, by more than one everything. Right? I've been duped. And I've fallen for the ancient astronaut shit decades ago. When it first started, I've fallen for all of it at least one point in time or another. Or at least considered it. But what's crazy as fuck, I have studied the occult, witchcraft, and all of this for so extensively and so long. Anybody who's watched me, they've watched me go through so many channels and, literally, and been deleted, removed so many times, shadow banned so many times. I mean, I've been hated by the system doing this, which anybody, you guys know, all of us are, right? And it's like, I always come back to sometimes the purest truth is the original truth, like the core. It's like, and the Bible says, remember your first love, right? And that's always stuck with me. Right? It's always stuck with me. It's always stuck with me. It's like, what did you first believe? And it's like the simplest belief of all. Right? Like that belief in God, and like as a child, like as a innocent child, just believing in God. And the goodness of that, and you know, all of it. It's just crazy. And it's like the more, and think about, you know, like, and there's something, you know, and I'm not telling people what to believe, but there is something about the Bible too, to where it is the great book, in my opinion. When they talk about and they refer to it in other texts as the great book, the book of wisdom, right? Book of truth. It's called by many names, you know, and this is the time of that great book. You know, there's something about it in particular that holds more, like, it's rock solid truth. Now, people's interpretation is fucked up, right? Like, people's interpretation, they destroy it with religion. But there's some real solid shit in there, you know? And it's got solid foundation, and it proves itself, and it's an amalgamation of all these other books. I disagree. Vehemently disagree. The Bible presents many distortions of the truth. No, it doesn't. I feel like people's interpretation of it presents the distortion of the truth. As a matter of fact, the Bible is an amalgamation of ancient texts of the Sumerians, you know, Mesopotamians, Akkadians, Assyrians, you know, all of these other, you know, religions and ancient texts and scriptures actually make up the Bible, you know. The story of Noah is the story of Veasudra, and, you know, like I said, the 40 and all of that is the number of Enki. If you know where all these books and texts come from, there's no distortion. It's your perception and your understanding. And I just seem like a little. Did you guys see that? Just whiz right past me. That was weird. It's your a little. Okay. Anyways, it's not the distortion. It's not distorted. It's our perception and our interpretation of that, and the religions that that are, you know, that are distorted. Not the book. The book is, you know, it's very accurate. You know, depending what time, and it don't matter the time period you pull it out of and what you're looking at, right? If you really know what you're looking at and you look at the etymology of the words, you can also say it is full of blood sacrifice. Well, yes, it is. Yes, it is. But so are all these other books, right? It's not to say what's right or wrong. You know, see, that's what I mean. Like, that's where people get it twisted. They think that their interpretation of it is what makes it true or false. Doesn't. It's just giving you the history. It's giving you the facts of, like, you know, it's giving you these, and that's why they put together these councils and stuff like that when they put it together, the original canon. I'm not saying there wasn't motives and they didn't leave some shit out that probably could have been put in there, like the Book of Enoch belongs in it, in my opinion. And you know, these apostolic texts and all of that, like they're the apocryphal text. The apocryphal text belong in there too, I'd say. But it's like, you know, our interpretation of what's right or wrong, what's good or evil, you know, is neither here nor there. It's just like, it's the information is founded, you know, on, you know, those texts and stuff have been, even today, like, it's hard to discredit the shit, is what I'm saying. So, um, no matter what you believe about it, it's not got nothing to do with your religious beliefs or what's right or wrong or, you know, good or bad. That's not what I mean. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, you know, you can guarantee that, you know, and the language is where it really gets fucked up. If you look at the NLT, NIV, KJV, all these different EST, you are not getting it. You have to look at the etymology of these words, and then you'll see, like, even the Old Testament means nothing like what you think it means, right? And those sacrifices, right, aren't always actually of killing people at all. They're actually allegorical, metaphorical, and they're, like I was saying in the very beginning of the episode, they're speaking to the subconscious, right? The collective unconscious. These are unconscious patterns, right, that are designed to awaken the subconscious and psychological parts of ourself, right? And it's about archetypical expressions of the human collective, right? But I mean, there's many other good books too. You know, many other good books. All the religious books are good to read, in my opinion. So here we go. This is the prehistory of the Atlanteans. And then we will move to the pole shift. Know your true self, and you will know the true story. Know your whole self, and you will know the wholeness of the truth. All is one. There is no other. Thus it always was. Thus it always shall remain. We once experienced only oneness. One being with no divisions or separate parts. There was no time, no space, nothing other than the us. When you are only one, there's only you, nothing else to interact with. In order to experience interaction, to experience being with someone else, to experience play, the one divided within itself, duplicating the one, thus creating many ones, many beings within the one. Part of this is what modern science calls the Big Bang. Still, one being, now in many parts were we, capable of pretending to be other than one, while still being one in harmonious consciousness. By vibration was it done? Division, multiplication, and expansion of the one. Set into motion were vibrations throughout the universe. On it went dividing, multiplying, creating new aspects of vibration through the overtones of harmony and ripples of the interacting vibratory reflections. Created this many new things and also initiated the time and space. Each of us were the entity of the one, the entirety of the one, the dark, the light, the stars, the planets, all of us, macrocosms of the one. In clusters, groups, we were in all directions, we being the entire universe. We then roamed ourselves as consciousnesses, as beings that cannot be described or understood by the present earth consciousness. Yet, describe I will try as best I can. Our existence was as close as you can comprehend in your present consciousness as beings of spirit, energy, light, star groups, solar systems. The groups that be the foundation of vibratory frequency and creating the physical plane of matter. The appearance is there, and that which forms the bodies of that plane, unattached, ever flowing with the flows of the universal plane, or universal one, were we, enjoying all the wonders of our new creation, our consciousness, both semi-separate from, yet still one with, the entire creation of the universe, allowed us the experiencing of new and different things. But within this new creation were the material planes. These were the realms in which existed the most dense or slowest spectrum of vibrations. There were many material planes throughout the universe, the earth being just one. The story I'm about to tell is only of those who manifested in the realm of the earth, but others of us manifested in the material planes of other solar systems. Some are now of the higher consciousness. Kindred beings are they from other worlds, but some from other worlds are of the selfish and evil. When we came upon the world of the earth, we had no comparison, no experience of the like, no expectation of what would be. The first group of us to discover this material plane were in awe of the new sensations it offered. This first group, or first wave of souls to materialize, was the first to enter the vibrational spectrum of matter in the time-space of the earth. They experienced such pleasure from playing in it that they projected themselves deeply into matter in thought forms, using thought to create a body. That were the most stimulating, the most sensational, those of the animal realm creations. And in creating these bodies, assorted aspects of different animals were often combined to achieve what they thought would be very desirable blends. Bird head, human bodies, horse body, human head, goat head, human body, fish tail, human torso, and many, many more variations. These would much later become known in Greek and Roman mythology by many names: centaurs, minotaurs, mermaids, etc. Unfortunately, these ones, our close kindred, had no way of knowing that as soon as they hardened their thought forms into matter, becoming these creatures, that they would lose all awareness, all consciousness of most things beyond their new bodies and their immediate environment. They became trapped in these forms. The 7 ports or chakras were closed, cutting off their contact of the full vibrational spectrum, and thus all their perceptions and interactions were thus based only on the limited vibration they could detect through only 5 vibrational sensors. You remember the first part of the Atlanteans thing? It was the 2, 3, the 5, right? These 5 senses could only monitor very limited frequency bands of the full universal vibrational spectrum, and even in that, they focused only on those vibrations relevant to the material plane of the spiritual planes of existence. Cut off from the consciousness of the One, and thus the very universe itself, the humanimals experienced animal consciousness, but the beings inhabited these forms were not animals, and originally of angelic consciousness. The combination of the consciousness that was meant to be of a higher form, blended with the animal consciousness, was a very inharmonious and disruptive mix. They lost the purity of animal consciousness and the purity of spiritual consciousness. Excuse me. So this was a new kind of consciousness that was foreign to the animal realm. This new consciousness was a separate consciousness and was of a fixed, focused nature and reverse polarity in comparison to the consciousness of the One. Intelligence was also severely curtailed in the humanimals, being similar to the intelligence of the types of animal that they were modeled upon. But again, this was adversely afflicted by the negative effects of separate consciousness. Thus were the humanimals stuck in this limited plane in limited forms with limited intelligence and a new limited consciousness. They didn't fit in anywhere. They didn't belong in the spiritual realms any longer, nor did they belong in Earth's nature. Thus, their introduction into the new Earth plane was also disruptive and polluting to the flow of nature. Those of us who did not project ourselves into matter were quite aware of the predicament and the fates that had befallen our kin. From the vantage point of our natural, etheric state of existence, we were still of one mind, one being. Seeing part of us in such matter-bound prisons as the humanimals had become trapped in was very painful. After all, the creatures were us, were our sister brothers, and their misfortune was our misfortune. In the terminology of some, they might also be called the first fallen angels, but they fell not of ill intent, but by virtue of ignorance of the purest kind. We decided to save them no matter what the cost. We knew we could only do this if we could function on the same vibratory plane as they. Excuse me. So we too projected ourselves into thought forms that could function within the realms of the Earth Mother. So now think about this, from some of the things that we've already gathered, through all of this, right? First you had the primordial beings, right? This is, Gaia and Neptune, and, these ethereal primordials. Okay. Then next you had these fallen angels, right? That fell down into this form, you know. This is like, Anubis and Thoth and all of these, these beings. They were half animal, right? And they were angels, though, too, right? And then you have, and think about the ages, too, right? The first is like the unified, spirit of the feminine and all of that, like the one consciousness, all that. And then the masculine, where the animal nature, like, so it goes from, like the original elements, raw elements, to like the fire, which is like the magic, right, of the masculine and all that, and to the water, where the good guys, which is man, Christ, the fish, right? We create the duality and we descend down, right? And we sacrifice ourselves, right, for the fallen angels, basically, and we join them. Led by the great being who became known as the Atlantean, Amelius, then known later as Thoth, and eventually well known as Jesus much later, the second wave of our entering into the planes of the Earth Mother began. And remember, there's 3 waves in the Atlanteans too, and they're saying Thoth is also Jesus, right? And Amelius, and I wonder if this would be also akin to Abraxas, right? So, and he's the son of God, and his, Thothme or whatever, Satan, Hasatan, Saturn, whatever, right? Thoth, and eventually well known as Jesus, much later, the second wave of our entering, which don't make sense to me that he's also Jesus, because the names have such a different meaning, they do. Like Jesus and stuff means salvation, right? And Thoth is like thought, so they're just 2 different aspects, but neither here nor there, right? The planes of the Earth Mother began, careful to stay as beings free from the lower vibratory planes or the hardening into the matter, right? Like the hardening of the heart, right? Because the heart is the seat of the soul. We projected ourselves into the material plane with thought-formed bodies that were semi-etheric matter, but not matter. Thus, were we still able to function on all vibrational frequencies of the universal spectrum, free to enter or leave the limited spectrum of the material plane at will. But most importantly, we were very intent upon maintaining our consciousness of oneness, so that we would not fall to the same fate as the humanimals. And that we can see this from another point of view too, right? The fallen angel type thing. You can see the ethereal primordial entities, then like Titans, Olympians, type of thing, right? Where you went from the Titans, right? These humanimals, to like the Olympians now, Thoth being the leader of them, right? Like the Thor or Zeus, So we can see that Lucifer, right, being the leader, and they're just trying to paint these guys as the good guys. Who fucking knows, right? Just saying. Just trying to give you different ways of looking at it. The manifestation was achieved more or less successfully, and as we became subject to the vibratory conditions which affect this realm, we saw the numerological representations of the physical plane 2 and 5 appear in many aspects of our manifestation, which I think I said this earlier. For example, the beings of the 5 races occurred, and later the 2 sexes, each being having 5 appendages, 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 head with 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 legs, 2 of many organs, etc., 5 fingers and toes on the arms and legs, And despite our precautions and great effort, some of us still fared not as well as others, losing more consciousness and hardening more than others. Those who manifested in Atlantis with Emilius fared the best, but for many, those was to be short-lived. Until this time, we were composite beings, macrocosms of the one. Our bodies were not as they are now. Our male and female elements had not yet separated, so they were androgynes. As composite beings, we each had one body that contained both sexes, rather than the male and female bodies we have now. The sexes then being just the inner and outer elements and outflowing and inflowing parts of our whole being. These were soulmate groups, as they are called now. Each composite being had different numbers of parts, a different number of soulmates, each part a being itself, but fully as one with the whole being. We were like beings in which planets orbit a star, or the atoms of matter in which elements of different polarity, male and female, are attracted to each other, each finding a place where they harmoniously function together within the whole as one entity, one being. In such composite beings, we existed in a state of unselfish love, constant flow, outflowing, giving fully of our life energies to each element of ourselves, within ourselves, and receiving within ourselves, and without in our relationship with the one, with each composite being also orbited, creating the even greater ultimate composite being of the one. And this is the service to others, right? Thy will be done. This is what I say too, if we think about it, God is the ultimate slave. He's the ultimate selfless entity, because he's in constant service, giving constant life force to everything and everyone infinitely, eternally, right? It's never for itself. It's just in constant for the rest, right? In creation, serving creation, right? At everyone else's service, right? And if we live like that in service of others, and we took our gifts and our talents and use them to serve others, right? And we gave and provided and loved, to each other, then nobody would ever have needs, But instead, we withhold for ourselves. We create secret societies to hold back knowledge, right? Universities to where you have to pay for education, It's crazy. Even what, nonprofits, are really not really like that. They're usually owned by fucking corporations and shit, and 1% of what people donate and give to them go to, help people. It's just crazy what we've created. It's all very, very selfish. Like, there's not very many people now that are just giving and loving and kind and selfless, and that use what they've been blessed with, whether it's money, food, talents, gifts, passions, whatever, to serve and give to others. Now, for the first time, some of us have begun to separate within ourselves, manifesting as individual bodies, representing the polarity elements. Bodies of opposite polarities then came into existence, male or female sex. The work of freeing the humanimals began. It was arduous and complex, but it proceeded well at first. Unfortunately, the contamination of separateness slowly began to creep in. We started slowly tasting many of the things that had instantly trapped the humanimals. Divisions began to occur between the Atlanteans over opinions and desires. The next symptoms of our disintegration was upon us, and this disease would eventually bring down Atlantis. Even in this higher state of manifestation, which we thought would keep us safe from the loss of consciousness that plagued the humanimals, some of us succumbed to the lure of material sensation, like the drug addict would behave with an unlimited supply of drugs. We began to delve more into the indulgences of this plane. We were lost in it, drowning in it. In the frenzy of our addiction to physical sensations, we disregarded all our precautions and wariness. Soon our thoughts and actions had collected matter from this material world that surrounded us and hardened our thought forms, making us matter bound also. Our consciousness simultaneously slipped, and our gradual loss of consciousness of oneness gave way to that new consciousness of predominant separateness. The consciousness of predominant separateness was foreign to us, totally new experience. And along with this new consciousness, some new emotions, and some pleasurable and some painful, strange new things like greed, envy, lust, excitement, fear, and desire. Some of us vigorously strive to maintain a semblance of our consciousness of oneness along with the new consciousness, and we were able to experience the emotions without being ruled by them. Such were the children of the law of one, but others lost or chose to deliberately suppress even a glimmer of awareness of the one. These beings became lost and enmeshed in separateness. Outside of the consciousness of oneness, they became subject to being tossed to and fro by the tides of emotional onslaught and ultimately became devoted to personal power and pleasure in the physical plane. These beings became known as the sons of Belial, even if they were female. Take heed of the ancient warnings and prophecies about the Belialians. Lizard-like are they, not in apparent physical description, but in spirit form. In the heart and the soul, beware even now of your lizard kin, for they rule the world with greed and without compassion, while maintaining appearance of good and righteous. As men and women do, these sons of Belial walk the earth, model citizens, successful leaders, who are the envy of the uninitiated. While some appear disgusting and strange to the eye, look not to see the ugliness of the Belialians with your eye, for some are handsome to the eye. See you will not their true lizard-like appearance with your earthly eye. See their true nature. You will only with the inner eye, or glimpses from the corner of the eye. When the division came within the people of Atlantis, many things went away and turmoil began. To function harmoniously, beings needed to have omnipresence. Their vision must include the whole picture. But when the attention is fixed and focused in the reverse polarity of separation, all that is seen are parts of the whole picture. Those parts that are not filtered out by the illusions of a separate consciousness. It is a limited view at best, and often is a lens distorted by emotions. Without awareness of the whole picture, the guidance of a coordinating force, actions become uncoordinated with others. To understand this better, imagine how well your present day body would function if each limb did not have awareness of what the other limbs were trying to do, or if each limb wanted to do different things from each other, no longer working together as one. Now imagine further. Imagine this lack of coordination keeping your eyes, ears, fingers, tongue, and mouth from working together as a team. Now consider the chaos, even total destruction that would occur if every single cell in your body operated with no unified guiding force that keeps them coordinated with the whole. In fact, that's what cancer is. You see, this became the problem with our very lives are some of the lost consciousness of the one. Some uncoordinated, independent activity became a logical evolution when such a separation occurs, and one is left with only an awareness of separateness. Thus, it came to be that the two Atlantean socio-political groups evolved with one very essential difference. The children had a consciousness of both separateness and oneness. The Belialians rejected the consciousness of oneness entirely and maintained only a consciousness of separateness. The differences of opinion between the two groups were great and many, including environmental issues, but nothing was more of an issue than the morality of how the humanimals were to be dealt with. Those of the law of one, remembering still that we originally came to this plane just to help release the humanimals from matter bondage, continued trying to free our trapped siblings. The kindred also created ways known to the initiate to aid in the maintenance of the consciousness of oneness, so we would never lose sight of our goals. But the Belialians wanted to use humanimals for their own comforts and pleasures. Since those of us from the second wave were of greater consciousness than the humanimals and could still function on a higher plane to some extent, we had powers of the mind, both spiritual and psychological, that made it easy for us to control humanimals. The children refused to use their abilities to control the humanimals, while the Belalians relished the power and wanted to use them as slaves. You know, it kind of makes me think of like demons too, right? Like how people, you know, um, people don't love demons, but you see, like loving people plagued with them, like being so good you love evil. You don't see it as an enemy, but see it with empathy and compassion. And then those who see it as an opportunity, right, to use demons to do their bidding. It kind of seems like the good and bad angels also over us, right? We are the ones who are caught trapped in flesh, trapped in the world, trapped, disconnected. So the other great division and opinion between the children and the Belalians was over the environment, as it's called now. The Belalians used methods of generating power, like electrical power, that were dangerous and destructive to the earth. Thus did the great conflict between the children and Belalians of Atlantis begin. A conflict between light and dark, between selfishness and unselfish love. And the conflict that was continued throughout history and continues to this day. The Belalians' lust for power and lack of care of awareness of the balances of nature led to the destruction of Atlantis. This was due in great part to the abuse of their power generation plants. When the final destruction occurred, Grandmaster Thoth then led us to the land of Kim to complete the great work of evolving the humanimals. And then boom, right there, see, to complete the great work of evolving the humanimals. And at the land of Kim, they found the hairy barbarian, right? They found men, the little men of Kim, right? As gods were we to the people of Kim, and yea, did they think the humanimals to be gods, and so it was done. The humanimals were brought to human levels to choose their path from there. Yet, there are residual effects. Have you not seen the humans that look much like pigs or goats, or that this or that animal still? These were they. But even though the humanimals were no more, the Belalians had not lost their taste for slavery. Thus, the great conflict with the Belalians was far from over, and still continues on with the children of the law of one as lamps, illuminating the path of the unselfish love, helping the lost find their way home to their spiritual heritage of the one, and to find freedom, while the disguised sons of Belial and their pawns do everything possible to maintain their decadence and power, and maintain slavery, whether it be direct or by means of livelihood and social control. And they seek to destroy all those who would shine light into this world of darkness. All those who do not actively work for the light are to varying degrees pawns of the Belial of darkness. And every time, that these little ages in, we have these cataclysms, right? Mass extinction events, catastrophic events that have been documented by fire, by water, by wind, and there's even theories that this is how celestial bodies are created, by harvesting energy from these bangs, right? The pieces creating energy and explosions, right? And even to this point today, right, we are seeing these things happening. Matter of fact, a real quick little clip.
Nominal, normal pole motion. The weakening had begun, but this is when the pole shift in total began. Now, going along with this is something I noticed in their motion minus Chandler wobble graphic. Folks, I live and breathe this data, and at no point did I ever think to do this. I had long suspected that the major accelerations occur after the slowdowns, like it's taking a breath, gearing up to lurch forward again. Folks, that's exactly what is shown here. And there is no good way to mathematically or even qualitatively show this without first removing the Chandler wobble, which I never thought to do.
Right. So to this day, we are on the cusp of another one of these things. He goes on to say, and I'll put this link in the description. This is a suspicious observer. Pole shift acceleration about to happen. Government is tracking it. So now NOAA is tracking this, right? They're lizard people, yeah. And we're going to look at, and in part 3, we're going to look at all of the pole shift and catastrophic stuff, and then the extraterrestrial aspect of this as well, right? But we have documents showing that when right before these pole shifts happen, there's a deviation in the length of the day, right? The velocity of the magnetic poles migration. This is over the last 150 years, right? And this increase in the migration of the poles. I even showed, this the other day. Right, you can see the migration. This is over the last 100 years. Migrating towards Siberia. That's the new magnetic north. Magnetic north moved 50 miles just last year. It migrated 50 miles just last year. Right? And we can see throughout history the Colburn, right? The book of miracles, all of these texts talk about this destroyer or this time where this massive catastrophe or cataclysms sweep the earth, right? And it could be or appears to be some type of magnetic anomaly or magnetic catastrophe that turns everything upside down. And if we look at the Atlanteans and we look at the simulation and information theory, it appears it's, from data or dark matter, something that's created this anomaly, right? And it's cyclical. And we don't know about it until it's too late. We're about to experience it again. So I'm going to wrap this one up for tonight. I want to ask all of you that are watching this now or catching this on the flip side, hit the thumbs up, hit the like for me. Comment. Let me know what you think about tonight's video. And please, please, please share this. That way new people can find me. Share it to your social media, Facebook, all that good stuff, man. And go follow me on the social media pages too. And please consider donating and supporting. I work really hard on this content. This is, how I take care of me. And it does cost to create the stuff. So all of your gifts are appreciated. You can donate paypal.me, the Best Damn Podcast, Cash App, Best Damn Podcast, Facebook.com, John Keane, Best Damn Podcast, or Patreon.com, Best Damn Podcast Official. And all those who donate and support will get access. You just text 513-393-2396 or email the Real Best Damn Podcast at gmail.com. And I'll give you access to the private playlist. There's probably that's the Mysteries of the Gods, the Forbidden Occult, the Gateways, the Necronomicon. There's all types of series that I have for those that here on YouTube and other platforms, and 200 to 300 watch hours of the uncensored videos, which have all been banned, deleted, blocked. I've gotten strikes on all the platforms, so lots and lots of good stuff. Please follow me, Instagram, Facebook, Best Damn Podcast, Twitter, The Real Best Damn, YouTube, Best Damn Podcast Official, Best Damn Podcast, John Keane 33, TikTok, The Best Damn Podcast, and BitChute, Rumble, all of it. The links are in the description box down below. I want to say thank you so much to everybody for watching tonight. Kimberly, you did a great job moderating. Eric as well. I appreciate all of you guys. Gondola Wish, Appreciate the comments. Jane Devlin, thank you guys so much, man. I just appreciate all of you guys. I can't tell you how much I appreciate all of you too. Sonia Dejner, just taking the time to watch, taking the time to share this, and especially you guys kind enough, generous enough to give. So, financially or otherwise. So I appreciate all of you guys. I hope you enjoy this. Check it out. Part 3. We'll be doing the catastrophism, magnetic destruction, and extraterrestrials. So see you soon.